Good morning. Time for convening has arrived. Senate will come to order. At this time, I will ask all unauthorized personnel to exit the chamber. Chair recognizes the senator from the 6th for reading of the journal.
Good morning, Mr. President. How was your weekend? It was good? It was good.
It was just wonderful, yeah.
Glad you're back. So honored to be in the same room with you. Mr. President, we have got a great list of pages from all over this great state. Out of Locust Grove, we have Larissa Augustine. Out of Chamblee, we have Alexander Bigger. Out of Lithia Springs, Jackson Denard. From from Alpharetta, Kate Ding. From Milledgeville, Branton Elliott. From Canton, Augustus Gorman. From Cumming, Manya Gulati. From Dahlonega, Lily Herger. Out of Dahlonega, Ali Johnson. Out of Cumming, Jack McElroy. From Bremen, Alexandra Miller. From Fairburn, Dion Nash. And from Tucker, Allison Nazario. From McDonough, Michael Avaje. Out of Cumming, Isabella Rapaccioli. From Lithia Springs, Hendrix Sanders Jr. From Atlanta, Naomi Smith. From Cumming, Mason Ty and Rima Vadhanam. And from Sewanee, we have Carson Yang. Y'all give these pages a big round of applause. We appreciate y'all being here, taking time out of your busy schedules and getting out of school. Mr. President, the journal has been read and found to be correct.
All right. Thank you, Senator, and thank you all the pages that joined us here today. Is there objection to dispensing of the reading of the journal? Chair hears none. The reading of the journal is dispensed with. Is there objection to the confirmation of the journal? Chair hears none. The journal is confirmed. All senators who have bills and resolutions to introduce, please bring them to the Secretary's desk at this time. First reading and references the Senate bills and resolutions. Secretary?
Senate Bill 233 by Senator Browse to the 6th, bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 6 of Chapter 1 of Title 37 of the Official Code of Georgia
Health and
Annotated.
Human Services.
Senate Bill 234 by Senator Payne of the 54th, bill to be entitled an act to provide a homestead exemption from City of Dalton Independent School District.
State and local government.
Senate Bill 235 by Senator Payne of the 54th, bill to be entitled an act to provide a homestead exemption for Whitfield
State
County.
and local government.
Senate Bill 236 by Senator Wicks of the 34th and others, bill to be entitled an act to amend Code Section 20-2-150 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated related to eligibility.
Veterans.
Senate Bill 237 by Senator Strickland of the 42nd and
State
others.
and local government.
Senate Bill 238 by Senator Anderson of the 43rd. A bill to
State
be
and local government.
Senate Bill 239 by Senator Walker of the 20th and others, bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 18 of Title 43 of the
Regulated industries.
Senate Bill 240 by Senator Williams of the 25th and others, bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 4 of Title 1 of the
Natural resources.
Senate Bill 241 by Senator Williams of the 25th and others, bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 18 of Title 43.
Regulated industries.
Senate Bill 242 by Senator Anna Vitarte of the 31st and others, bill to be entitled an act to amend Part 2 of Article 4 of Chapter 13 of
Rules.
Senate Resolution 244 by Senator Rhett of the 33rd and others, a resolution encouraging all states to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment and commending those states which have already done so and for other purposes.
Judiciary.
Senate Resolution 245 by Senator Gooch of the 51st and others, a resolution.
Veterans.
Senate Resolution 246 by Senator Gooch of the 51st and others, a resolution commending Donald J. Trump and for other purposes.
Rules.
Senate Resolution 247 by Senator Gooch of the 51st and others, a resolution commending Kelly Loeffler.
Economic development.
Mr. President, that completes the order.
First reading references the House bills.
House Bill 58 by Representative Richardson of the 125th and others.
Transportation.
House Bill 167 by Representative Hagan of the 156th.
Natural resources.
House Bill 181 by Representative Earhart of the 36th and
Children
others.
and family.
House Bill 192 by Representative Gamble of the 15th and others. A bill to be entitled an act to amend Title 20 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated related to higher education.
Higher education.
House Bill 196 by Representative Kelly of the 16th and others. A bill to be
Insurance
entitled
and labor.
House Bill 205 by Representative Clark of the 100th and others. A bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter.
Transportation.
House Bill 226 by Representative Mathis of the 133rd and others, bill to be entitled an act to amend.
State and local government.
House Bill 283 by Representative Neal of the 79th and others, bill to be
Public
entitled.
safety.
House Bill 380 by Representative Green of the
State and
154th.
local government.
House Bill 381 by Representative Green of the 154th and others, bill.
State and local government.
House Bill 396 by Representative Campbell of the 53rd and
State
others.
and local government.
House Bill 404 by Representative Taylor of the 92nd and others, bill to be entitled an act to amend an act.
State and local government.
House Bill 412 by Representative
State and
Taylor.
local government.
House Bill 448 by Representative Chastain.
State and local government.
House Bill 462
State and
by
local government.
House Bill 468 by Representative Huddleston of the 72nd and others, bill to be entitled an act.
State and local government.
House Bill 476 by Representative Stevens of the 1.
State and local government.
House Bill 498 by Representative Hefner of the 130th and others.
State and local government.
Mr. President, that completes the order.
Secretary Reed reports to standing committee.
Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Appropriations has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. House Bill 67, due pass by substitute, respectfully submitted, Senator Tillery, the 19th District Chairman. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Regulated Industries and Utilities has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 146, due pass by substitute, respectfully submitted, Senator Cowser of the 46th District Chairman. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Senator from the 19th, for what purpose do you rise?
Make a motion, Mr. President.
Go ahead.
I move that I ask for unanimous consent that Senate Rule 4-2.6 and 4-2.9C be suspended to allow for the second reading of House Bill 67, the state's amended budget.
Senator has moved. Secretary, read the caption.
House Bill 67 by Representative Burns, the 159th, and others, the bill to be entitled an act to amend an act making and providing appropriations for the state fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2024 and ending June 30th, 2025, known as the General Appropriations Act, Act Number 709, approved May 7th, 2024, so as to make, provide, and change certain appropriations for the operation of the state government and its departments, boards, bureaus, commissions, institutions, and other agencies, for the university system, common schools, counties, municipalities, and political subdivisions, for all other governmental activities, projects, and undertakings authorized by law, and for all leases and for other purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
The Appropriations Chair has moved that the Senate suspend the rules so that we can have a second reading of HB 67. Is there objection? Without objection. Motion. Secretary read bills and resolutions for the second time.
Senate Bill 4 by Senator Dolezal, the 27th, and others, Education, Fundamental Roles of Local Boards of Education and Local School Superintendents, Revised Provisions. Senate Bill 33 by Senator Kirkpatrick, of the 32nd, and others, Georgia Hemp Farming Act, Total THC Concentration of Consumable Hemp Products, Provide Limits. Senate Bill 42 by Senator Hatchett, of the 50th, and others, Penalties for Violating Code Sections 16-6-9 through 16-6-12, Certain Penalty Provisions for the Offense of Prostitution, Keeping a Place of Prostitution, Pimping, and Pandering, repeal. Senate Bill 57 by Senator Tillery, the 19th, and others, Freedom of Speech and Belief Act, enact. Senate Bill 79 by Senator Goodman of the 8th, and others, Fentanyl Eradication and Removal Act, enact. Mr. President, that completes the order.
Does not. Read 67 one more time. Get to General Appropriations Act, May 7, 2024.
House Bill 67 by Representative Burns, the 159th, and others, bill to be entitled act to amend an act making and providing appropriations for state fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2024 and ending June 30th, 2025, known as the General Appropriations Act, Act Number 709, approved May 7th, 2024, and for other purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
It is now time for the morning roll call. Are there any motions to excuse? Recognize the Senator from the 33rd.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, y'all. Ask for unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 35th for business inside the Capitol, sir.
You say 35th? All right, without objection, the senator from the 35th is excused. Recognize the senator from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like permission to excuse the senator from the 52nd for business outside the Capitol.
Without objection, the senator from the 52nd is excused. Any other motions to excuse? All right, Secretary will call the roll. Senator, signify your presence by voting the yea switch. Secretary will unlock the machines. Senator,
I ask for unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 35th. Oh, he's here? Okay.
she's already been excused. Or he's already been excused. It is now time for the morning devotion. All senators, please take your seats and cease all conversation. I would ask the doorkeepers secure the chamber at this time. I now recognize the senator from the 7th to introduce our chaplain of the day and lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance. Senator?
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. And to the Georgia flag. Thank you. I'm pleased to introduce Pastor Elijah Collins of the New Jerusalem Baptist Church in Lawrenceville. He's a native of Rome, Georgia, and discovered his faith early and became active at Greater Mount Calvary Baptist Church. After attending West Georgia College, he married his college sweetheart, Angeline Edwards, in 1991, and together they have 2 children. In 1993, his family joined Salem Missionary Baptist Church in Lilburn, Georgia, and there he felt God's call and began preaching in 1994 while serving as a youth and children's minister for 5 years. Ordained in 1999, he later became Salem's first full-time youth and children's pastor. And in 2001, while serving as chaplain at Grace Heritage Christian School, he was inspired to launch New Jerusalem Baptist Church. Under his leadership, the congregation grew from 17 founding members to over 400 families, with more than 20 associate ministers licensed and many of his spiritual children advancing into ministry. Pastor Collins works tirelessly for his members. He is a champion for people young and old. He shows his love for the youth by visiting and speaking with them at their local schools. He shows his love for his seniors by sharing with them monthly during their monthly senior luncheons. Pastor Collins also instructs weekly preachers training class, Bible studies, and still makes time for his family's many activities. Pastor Collins has a reputation of reaching beyond the walls of New Jerusalem to work with non-members in their surrounding community, and I really enjoy his sermons. Thank you.
Good morning. Giving honor to President Jones and Representative Eastland Park, to this waiting august body of senators. I was asked this morning how I'm doing, and I said I was struggling a little bit. I said I was nervous, and I said not nervous because of standing here, but nervous because I'm a Baptist preacher, and we usually do this longer than 5 minutes. And so I was trying to make sure we concise everything down, and so I'm gonna try to get out of your way. I am, as Senator Islam Parks stated, Pastor Elijah Collins Jr. I'm the founding pastor of the New Jerusalem Baptist Church of Lawrenceville, Georgia. I've served there for 22 years, and I want to thank you all for this opportunity to stand before you this morning. Matthew's Gospel, Matthew 22, 37, 40 through 40, reads from the NIV. Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all of your soul and with all of your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it. It says, love your neighbor as yourself. And all the law of the prophets hang on these two commandments." The founding fathers established the United States to create a nation based on the principles of liberty, self-governance, and individual rights, free from the tyranny of British rule. They sought to build a system where power was driven from the people, ensuring freedoms such as speech, religion, and economic opportunity. This vision remains attractive to foreigners who seek political freedom, economic prosperity, and a society where they can pursue their dreams without oppression, oppressive government control. The American ideals of democracy, opportunity, and equality continue to draw people and families from around the world. Religion played a significant role in the founding of the United States, but not in the establishment of a state religion. Many of the founding fathers valued religious freedom and sought to create a government that protected the right to worship not to worship without interference. The First Amendment established the separation of church and state, ensuring no official religion would be imposed. However, religious principles such as moral responsibility and human rights influenced early American values and political thought, making the U.S. an attractive destination for those seeking religious freedom. I can't speak for all 50 of the states, but Georgia has become a melting pot for people of various ethnicities, religions, and cultures. Not only has the state of Georgia become diverse, but so has the representation under the Gold Dome. It is indicative of the state and the cities and the counties and the communities that we all reside in. This diversity brings a multitude of religious beliefs, as represented by those of you in the chamber this morning. I am a Christian, but I realize that everyone in here is not Christian. In this room, there are people of many different faiths. Some are Hindu, some are Buddhist, some of Islam, some Judaism, and I'm sure that the list goes on and on. However, regardless of the different religions, there is one tenet that is found in most major religions, and that is an emphasis on compassion, justice, and the care for marginalized communities, including the poor and the elderly. Regardless of what religion you are affiliated with, when you went into your communities and requested their votes to sit in these seats and to share their beliefs with them, they expected you to represent them standing on the belief that you all share together. In this room, Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, all of these religions can come together and form one great body to help to make rules and decisions for the state of Georgia. All of them have that tenet to take care of one another. In the Hindu faith, Hindu teaches an emphasis on self-service and charity as a key virtue. It teaches and it suggests that those who do not share their wealth are thieves in a spiritual sense. It teaches respecting elders and caring for aging parents and taking care of the business at hand. Buddhism, one of those principles in the Buddhism faith is compassion. Buddhism urges its followers to aid the poor and the suffering. It encourages them to participate in generosity, and this leads to good karma and enlightenment. In the faith of Islam, it's one of the 5 pillars of Islam is charity. It requires Muslims to give a portion of their wealth to the poor, and they give food in spite of love, for it is the needy, the orphans, and the captives. It also emphasizes being kind to elders. In Judaism, the Torah commands care for the poor and marginalized, and laws of gleaning that allow the poor to gather food. The Hebrew Bible states, defend the weak and fatherless, uphold the cause of the poor and oppressed, honor the elder in your midst. As I stated earlier, I am a Christian, and many of you are the same in the room. The Bible encourages us that helping the poor, with verses like Proverbs 19:17, which reads, whoever is kind to the poor leads to the Lord, or lends to the Lord, and he will reward them with what they have done. Jesus himself associated with the marginalized and preached about caring for them. The early Christian church practiced communal support, ensuring no one was going to be left in need. As you see, these philosophies of caring for one another runs deep through our faith, not just one faith, but all faith. And so when we get to Matthew's gospel, the 22nd chapter, verse 37 through 40, Jesus has been asked the question, what is the greatest, if you will, what is the greatest law? What is the greatest commandment? There's a debate in the room, whether the old law works or the new law. And Jesus says simply, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first commandment. And then he says, love your neighbor as yourself. Honorable legislators of Georgia, you have been entrusted with the responsibility of shaping laws and policies that impact the lives of millions. In Matthew 22:37 through 40, Jesus distills all of God's commands into two fundamental principles: love for God, love for neighbor. Today I want to share three things before I get out of your way that this passage teaches us. It teaches us, one, to love God by leading with integrity. It teaches us, number two, to love your neighbor through fair and just policies. It teaches, number three, to be bold and build unity, not division. Love God by leading with integrity. Jesus commands us to love God with all our heart, soul, and mind. This means aligning our work with his righteousness. As legislators, integrity should be the foundation of your service. Proverbs 11:3 reminds us the integrity of the upright guides them, but the unfaithful are destroyed by duplicity. Whether making policies on education, healthcare, or economic development, let your decisions reflect a commitment to truth, to justice, and the well-being of all people, not just special interests. The next one is love your neighbor through fair and just policies. Jesus places love our neighbor on the same level as loving God. Your neighbor is every Georgian, rich and poor, young and old, rural or urban. Every law you pass should be measured by this question: does it promote the well-being of our people, especially the vulnerable? Micah chapter 6 verse 8 says, he has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. Policies on housing, criminal justice, and education should reflect God's heart for justice and mercy. The last point I want to make: build unity, not division. In a time when politics is often polarized, Jesus' word reminds us that love is the highest calling. As leaders, you have the power to foster unity or deepen division. Romans 12:18 urges, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Now, this does not mean ignoring differences, but working together for the common good. Love calls us to seek bipartisan solutions, listen with humility, and love calls us to lead with wisdom that often unites rather than divides. In conclusion, Jesus taught us how to love. One thing love does is love sacrifices. We're told as Christians And I believe it in the depths of my spirit that Jesus showed love by going to the cross at Calvary, by hanging between two thieves, by being placed in a borrowed tomb, and by staying there all the way up into Easter morning, and then getting up with all power in his hands. We believe that. And that's the power. That's the thing that gives us the faith to lead in our churches, to lead in our communities, to lead during times of great persecution. Let us pray. Dear God, our Father, we come today and we thank you for all that you have done in our lives. We thank you, oh God, for bringing us to this pivotal point this morning. We thank you, oh God, for what we've heard. And we pray, Lord, that the word saturates our heart, that we understand that love is key, that as this body begins to make legislation, that we do it with love in mind. How do we love the people that we serve? God, we thank you that you loved us so much that you gave your son who gave his life. And now, Father, we pray that as this meeting continues on, that you will pour out your spirit, that you will bless our great leader in Brother Jones. We pray, God, for his family. We pray, oh God, for the families that are attached by those that are here. And God, we'll give you honor and we'll give you glory. Make your will be done in this great state that we call Georgia, that we call home. It is in the name of Jesus that we pray. Amen, and thank God.
It's always nice to have our doctors of the day here, and I recognize the senator from the 32nd to introduce our doctor of the day.
Thank you, colleagues. You have met this doctor before. Dr. Brett Cannon is my neighbor and longtime friend, and he's an emergency physician. He trained at the University of North Carolina and then Emory University, and since that time, he's been working for Apollo MD for many years, and he now serves as president overseeing their clinical operations at Wellstar. So with that, I would ask you to welcome Dr. Cannon. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll just say, appreciate all the work from the Senate as always, and also note that it is Georgia College of Emergency Physician Week at the Capitol. As the outgoing president, I get to kick that off, so you'll have ER doctors in the medical aid station all week. Hopefully any visits are for general stuff, not emergency, but we're here if you need us. Thank you very much.
All right, good job, good job, good job. Senator from the 42nd, do you have your light on for a reason? We have a very special guest here with us today. Secretary, read the caption, please.
Senate Resolution 138 by Senator Hickman of the 4th and others, a resolution recognizing and commending Georgia Reed's coach Malcolm Mitchell and for other purposes. Whereas Malcolm Mitchell, Super Bowl champion, author, and speaker, was named the Georgia Reed's coach by the Georgia Council on Literacy, and whereas founder of the Share the Magic Foundation and player for both the University of Georgia Bulldogs and New England Patriots, Malcolm has demonstrated his energy, dedication, and commitment to inspiring kids to read, and whereas through in-school programs, virtual challenges, and community partner programs, the Share the Magic Foundation has reached students not only in Atlanta and across Georgia, but also in all 50 states and in 17 countries. Now therefore be it resolved by the Senate that the members of this body recognize and commend Georgia Reed's coach Malcolm Mitchell for his important work in using literacy to empower individuals to find successful careers, keep healthy, and contribute to their family and community. Mr. President, that completes the order.
Is there objection to the adoption of the resolution? Chair hears none. The resolution is adopted. It is a great honor to have Malcolm Mitchell here with us again this year. Malcolm is doing a great job, has been working with his foundation for several years now, and they've also been working with our literacy state literacy program as well, as far as trying to help educate and also put the importance of early childhood reading development to all of our school systems around the state. So we appreciate all the hard work that Malcolm has been doing, and I recognize our chairman of Education and Youth, the senator from the 4th, to speak to the resolution. Senator?
Thank you, Mr. President. Today we proudly recognize Malcolm Mitchell, our friend, and a true champion for literacy in Georgia. Through his Share the Magic Foundation, as well as agreeing to be our state's Georgia Reed's coach, Malcolm ignites a passion for reading in children across our state, providing that literacy is the gateway to lifelong success. I want to personally express my sincere gratitude to my colleagues in the Senate and the House for their continued leadership in prioritizing literacy. Your support has been instrumental in driving initiatives that equip our students with the foundational reading skills they need to succeed. The creation of the Georgia Council on Literacy through Senate Bill 211, which passed this chamber 100% and the House 100% and the governor signed, was a pivotal step forward. The council plays a critical role in guiding our state's literacy efforts, and we must continue to support their work to ensure every child in Georgia can read proficiently. As Scott Johnson, chairman of the Literacy Council, says, this is Georgia's most solvable problem. While we've made significant progress, there's still more work ahead. Literacy is the foundation for a strong workforce and a thriving communities. Let's build on this momentum and continue to invest in programs and policies that give all Georgia children the opportunity to read, learn, and achieve. Thank you, Malcolm, and thank you for being here, and look forward to your comments. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you for this opportunity to address this body. As you have learned, my name is Malcolm Mitchell. I was born and raised in Valdosta, Georgia. And growing up in Valdosta, Georgia, I believe that football reigns supreme. But I've learned through experience and through statistical evidence that reading is the most self-empowering tool a person could possess. So I'm thankful that Georgia has given me an opportunity to encourage its communities to continue to read. The latest 2024 NAEP scores really show a challenging problem. Only 30% of our third graders are reading at or above proficiency levels, which means 70% are not. We all know that we need to do something about that to change the outcome, not just for those students, but for our state in its entirety. I am an optimist, and I believe we can get the job done. I want to thank the Lieutenant Governor. I want to thank Chairman Scott Johnson. I want to thank Senator Billy Hickman for these opportunities like I'm given today. I also want to acknowledge the Georgia Council on Literacy selected me as the Georgia Reads coach, giving me an opportunity to encourage and inspire the communities. But we know great things are not done alone, so in partnership with Georgia Municipal Association, our adult learning program at TCSG, Get Georgia Reading, the Dill Center, and Department of Early Care and Learning, we are working, and we hope that you will continue to work along beside us. I hope that all of you will join us tomorrow, February 25th at noon, to celebrate Georgia Reads Day. During Read Bowl, we had over 130,000 students participating and doing their best to read to a brighter future. We will award those who did an extraordinary job, and we'll be recognizing the top readers from Waynesboro, Albany, Kingsland, and Chattahoochee County. We'll also be awarding the 10 communities who are receiving the Georgia Reads Community Awards. We hope that you will be present, and we hope that you never get tired of doing good. Thank you for your time this morning.
We have a special group from Jonesboro, Georgia. This is the marching band that was invited to participate in the inaugural parade in Washington, D.C., and they do a fantastic job. Secretary, read the caption, please.
Senate Resolution 240 by Senator Davenport of the 17th and others, a resolution recognizing and commending the Jonesboro Majestic Marching Cardinals and for other purposes. Whereas the Jonesboro Majestic Marching Cardinals is an esteemed musical ensemble dedicated to taking learning beyond the classroom, providing students with access to invaluable experiences and once-in-a-lifetime opportunities through music. And whereas the band strives to prepare students for post-secondary education by offering exposure to diverse opportunities through travel and assisting graduating seniors in securing music scholarships, thereby making higher education more accessible and affordable. And whereas during the leadership of director Linnell Goodwin, the band has earned national acclaim through major accomplishments, now therefore be it resolved by the Senate that the members of this body recognize and commend the Jonesboro Majestic Marching Cardinals for their outstanding contributions to music education, student enrichment, and the state of Georgia, as well as extend best wishes for continued success. Mr. President, that completes the order.
All right, is there objection to the adoption of the resolution? Chair hears none. The resolution is adopted. Recognize the senator from the 17th. Speak to the resolution.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Colleagues, I am delighted to recognize the Jonesboro High School Majestic Marching Cardinals today at the Georgia State Capitol with a resolution from the Georgia State Senate. This band is phenomenal, led by the band director, Mr. Linnell Goodwin, who is a graduate of Bethune-Cookman University, and he brought all these musical skills to Jonesboro High School. The band strives to prepare students for post-secondary education by offering exposure to diverse opportunities through travel and assisting graduating seniors in securing music scholarships. Under the leadership of Dr. Goodwin, the band has earned national acclaim through major accomplishments such as performing at the City of Jonesboro mayoral inauguration in 2019, participating in the nationally televised Chicago Thanksgiving Day Parade in 2019, making an appearance on Good Morning America in 2021, and emerging as a champion of the Great Atlanta Band Challenge in 2021. Also proudly represented Georgia at the 2022 National 4th of July Parade in Washington, D.C., and in 2023, the band was honored with the Music for All Advocacy and Action Award. And this past November, the Jonesboro Marching Band, High School Marching Band, represented the state of Georgia at the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade in New York, and will represent Georgia in January 2026 at the New Year's Day Parade in London. You see how great Jonesboro is. So today, the Georgia State Senate commends the Jonesboro Majestic Marching Band Cardinals for their outstanding contributions to music education, student enrichment, and the state of Georgia as well, and extends the best wishes for continued success. I have with me today a group here on the stage. We have the band director, Mr. Goodwin, with 4 drum major students, William Shelton, Keldrick DuBois, Bailey Brown, and McCall LeBoyd. Also, we have the principal of Jonesboro High School. Please raise your hand, Ms. Tanisha Bailey. And then we have Dr. Bowie, Director of Fine Arts for Clayton County Public Schools. Thank you. And then Mr. Brown, the musical instructional specialist for Clayton County Public Schools. I'm a proud graduate of Clayton County, Fountain High School, but today we recognize Jonesboro Marching Band Cardinals, and Cardinals in the audience, please stand up in the gallery. Welcome them to the Georgia State Senate. You look good. Academic excellence. Thank you so much. Now, welcome Mr. Goodwin to the platform here.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Linnell Goodwin, and I am the esteemed director of this wonderful group of students that you see behind me, as well as up in the gallery. I just must say it has been a complete honor to represent this great state of Georgia on all of these national and international platforms, and we plan to do much, much more. My only ask of you is that you please continue to support our public school systems, continue to pour into our fine arts programs, because our band program is more than just music notes and the hottest dance movements. This band program changes our students' lives. It is these once-in-a-lifetime opportunities that shape who they become as adults and make them the citizens that we want them to be to serve this great country and this great state. So with that being said, I would just like to thank, let me pull out my list. I was doing so good. I want to thank Principal Bailey, my principal. I also want to thank Dr. Bowie, our fine arts instructor, our fine arts director, as well as Mr. Brown. I also would like to thank Dr. Smith, the Clayton County Public Schools superintendent, who always supports us in these endeavors. I would also like to give a shout out to our CCPS Board of Education, as well as our parents, and last and certainly not least, our students. Please give our students one more round of applause for all of their hard work. Last and certainly not least, I would like to thank Senator Gail Davenport, for distinguishing this band with this wonderful, wonderful, great honor. As long as you continue to support us in our band program, we will continue to put Georgia on the map in positive ways. Thank you so much.
It is a pleasure to have some local folks from Stevens County and here to celebrate their fine medical facility, hospital that they have in their community. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Resolution 242 by Senator Hatch to the 50th and others, a resolution congratulating Stevens County Hospital and for other purposes. Whereas a proud partner to the communities in the region, Stevens County Hospital provides crucial and excellent care to its patients and has been named the 2024 #1 small hospital in the state of Georgia by Georgia Trend Magazine, earning a top ranking among hospitals in the state with 100 or less beds. Whereas a pillar of healthcare for families in Northeast Georgia for more than 88 years, Stevens County Hospital has achieved award-winning goals and tremendous growth under its current administration and board leadership. And whereas Stevens County Hospital has additionally received Center for Excellence status with the Joint Commission for Hip and Knee Replacement Surgery and is currently Georgia's newest designated stroke center. Now therefore be it resolved by the Senate that the members of this body congratulate Stevens County Hospital upon being named the #1 small hospital in Georgia by Georgia Trend Magazine, commend its continued dedication to providing exceptional healthcare services, and extend best wishes for continued success. Mr. President, that completes the order.
Is there objection to the adoption of the resolution? Chair hears none. The resolution is adopted. Recognize the senator from Habersham County to speak to the resolution. Senator?
Thank you, Mr. President. It's a great honor for me to have Stevens County Hospital here today. Stevens County Hospital has been recognized by the Georgia Trend Magazine as the top hospital in the state for beds with less than 100 beds. It's a huge accomplishment. If you recognize where they were 4 or 5 years ago, they almost had to close their doors, and through great leadership and just involvement in the community, they have really been able to turn it around. Not only have they achieved this recognition, they've also been recognized by the Joint Commission as one of the leaders in hip and knee replacement. They're also Georgia's newest stroke center. They are really just leading and are kind of like a lighthouse for small hospitals all across the country. I was speaking to the CEO a minute ago, and I said, what do you attribute your success to? And he said, well, we really had to look at what the community needed, and we adjusted our hospital to fit the community no matter how hard it was. So I'm very proud to represent Stevens County and very proud of the work that they've done in the hospital, and I'd like to introduce the CEO of the hospital, Van Laskowski.
Thank you, Senators. It's a privilege to be recognized here. Introducing the other members of our team, we have our Chief Nursing Officer, Deb Block, our Marketing and Public Relations Director, Jolie Strickland, one of our family medicine physicians, Dr. Kalpesh Mistry, and the Chairman of the Stevens County Hospital Authority, Stan Roberts. I also want to recognize our other colleagues that are here in the gallery. We thank you for your attendance here. This recognition belongs to the hundreds and hundreds of other people that aren't here working in our hospital today, providing high quality care, working to change the tide and working to change the perception of what rural healthcare is and what rural healthcare can be. We are not a Band-Aid station. We are not a transfer center. 96% of the patients that come to our emergency department seeking treatment stay at our hospital for the entirety of their treatment. There's great work that can be done in our rural communities, and we appreciate the support of our senators and all of our representatives here. And thank you, Senator Hatchett, for the support that you always give to us. Thank you.
All right, good job. Are there any unanimous consents? Does any senator wish to rise on a point of personal privilege? And everything lights up. Recognize senator from the 42nd.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate, just a quick announcement. Tomorrow morning at 9:30, from 9:30 to 10:30 downstairs, and 2:30 here in the Capitol, we'll have our Municipal Court Judges Council visiting. So go check out your city court judges back home. They'll be visiting tomorrow morning again from 9:30 to 10:30 and 2:30 of the Capitol. Thank you.
Recognize the senator from the 34th for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. My military career started in 1992 with Operation Restore Hope in Somalia. and Black Hawk Down. I stood at Dover Air Force Base and placed flags over service members' remains and had to tell their families they were never coming back home. And then I went to Operation New Dawn in Iraq and served 15 months. And then my career, I served in NATO where I got injured. So I just didn't retire with 30 years. I was medically retired in combat. Military personnel are governed by UCMJ and not by politics. Leadership, unbiased. They just want to know that they are being taken care of. You know, I was approached by a Georgia Army officer. She was concerned about her military career. See, she is a infantry officer. We're here recently, they just opened it up where women are able to serve in roles in infantry, armor, and those branches where women were not able to serve before. And before, where they had don't ask, don't tell. I had several of my soldiers commit suicide because they were bullied and harassed because of that. That's why it's important that we have the Veterans Crisis Line, and that we have this key roles in Veterans Affairs that we need to advocate for. During Black History Month, I'm reminded that Dr. King's words that we should not be judged by the content of our character, nor the color of our skin. Unfortunately, Trump's actions, such as firing the high-ranked 4-star general who is African American and the 4-star admiral who is a white American, contradicts Dr. King's philosophy, which I find very appalling, disrespectful as a 30-year retired Army officer, having to serve along my men and women in uniform to this country. With that, I yield the well.
Recognize Senator from the 19th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I did not mash my button, but since one of my colleagues did, it's a great time to come down here and say this. We worked on the budget all last week, and it was very trying. It was taxing. It was hard, and I appreciate all the effort you put into it. But I need to give a shout out to my wife. You see, she was on call this weekend, and I had to keep the boys by myself for 48 hours. I will take 148 hours with you, gentlemen and ladies, working on the budget, than handling children by myself for 48. Ashley Nicole, you're amazing. You delivered babies this weekend and still keep our kids safe. So whoever pushed my button, thank you so much for letting me come down here and say thank you to my wife. Mr. President, I yield the well.
Recognize Senator from the 33rd.
Thank you, Mr. President, my fellow senators, colleagues, friends, and y'all. You too. I just want to remind you that myself and the senator from the 6th, we are the co-chairs of the Korean and Taiwan caucus. And if you're interested in signing up and becoming a member, just give us a little holler and we will sign you up. That's the senator from the 6th. Can't say his name, but y'all know who he is. And yours truly, Doc. Thank you so much, Mr. President. I yield well.
Recognize Senator from the 44th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today in honor of Black History Month to tell you all about a remarkable Georgian, remarkable woman, Mrs. Annie L. McPheeters. She's likely not a household name for many of us, but she was committed to uplifting the voices of the voiceless. She worked as a librarian, educator, and civil rights activist. She was a member of the historically Black Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. She was an avid writer, authoring a number of captivating writings focused on uplifting and inspiring the Black community into action. She was born in 1908 in the segregated South, but worked tirelessly to educate African Americans despite the overwhelming racial discrimination that at the time excluded them from receiving any form of formal education. That Annie herself pursued her own education as a Black woman was for that time pretty miraculous. She earned an English degree at Clark University, a Bachelor of Science degree in Library Science at the Hampton Institute, and a Master's in Library Science from Columbia University. Ever curious and hungry for knowledge, Annie McPheeters learned through reading and writing. Resources available to her through the very few local libraries that were open to Black Americans at the time were skeletal, but that didn't stop her. I wanted to mention trailblazing Annie McPheeters to you all today to celebrate the fight she fought, not only for herself to receive a proper education, but for the Black community as a whole. She worked tirelessly to promote education for her community, often alongside with and in partnership with other Black advocacy groups to lobby for the desegregation of the Atlanta Public Library, which a feat that she began in 1921 and was finally achieved in 1959. We can thank Mrs. McPheeters for her determination in preserving the first public library branch for African Americans in the city of Atlanta, which is now the Auburn Avenue Research Library on African American culture and history. As an author herself, Mrs. McPheeters emphasized the importance of libraries in progress for African Americans as she continued to advocate for literacy and Black rights until her death in 1994. Her work as an activist, author, and librarian left a lasting legacy on the Atlanta area, serving as a model for successful political activism and highlighting the importance that well-resourced libraries hold within our communities, which is why, in closing, the Atlanta Fulton Public Library System in 1993 named the Annie L. McPheeters Branch Library in her honor. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Recognize the Senator for the 49th. Does any other senator wish to rise on a point of personal privilege? Hearing none, you have before you a consent calendar of privilege resolutions. Does any senator wish to remove a resolution from the consent calendar? Senator from the 55th, for what purpose do you rise? Point of personal privilege. You got here just in time, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Governor. I just wanted to say thank you for those that were concerned about me on Friday. I had a reaction to some vitamins, zinc, B12, something, but I was throwing up all over the place, and they took me in as a precaution for those of you didn't know. But thank you for that. And as I was in that hospital, I thought about something. They put a blood plasma bag on me. And the next time that you go to get a blood plasma bag, I want you to thank a black man by the name of Charles Drew. And that's my point of personal privilege, to just say that we have an awesome country because we can all contribute to its greatness. And there are so many things that now seemingly we don't recognize as important, but it was important for me to have that plasma, even though I told him I didn't need it. But I thank you for thinking about the red light. When you next time you go to a red light, I want you to think of Charles, a guy by the name of Benjamin Banneker, when you go to a red light, because there was another black man who invented that. When you think of the air conditioning unit, when you think of the almanac, when you think of even a baby buggy, when you think of the fire extinguisher, these are some common things that people of African descent, African Americans, black people, put together. A gas mask, something as simple as a golf tee, hairbrush, ice cream scoop, insect destroyer gun, keychain, a lantern. Did you know that a mailbox, something as simple as a mailbox, attributed to a person of color, and you know about peanuts, because you know when we get those peanuts in those little bags, there was a guy that developed so many different uses of that peanut, and his name was George W. Carver, peanut butter. So that is my minute as I think about the tricycle, phone transmitter, street sweeper, straightening comb. These were people of color who have contributed to the richness of our great nation, and I thank you for this privilege, and thank you for being great representatives of the respective districts. I yield the well.
Is there objection to the adoption of the resolution on the consent calendar? Chair hears none. The resolution on consent calendars are adopted. Senator from the 53rd recognizes you for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask the Senate for unanimous consent that Senate Bill 62 be withdrawn from Veterans, Military, and Homeland Security and be recommitted to interstate cooperation. Both chairmen have agreed.
Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 62 by Senator Moore of the 53rd, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Part 1 of Article 1 of Chapter 2 of Title 38 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated related to general provisions regarding state militia generally, so as to require an official declaration of war or an official action to call forth the state militia by the United States Congress before members of the Georgia National Guard may be released from state control to participate in active duty combat or combat support operations, to provide for definitions, to provide for construction, to provide for a short title, to provide for related matters, to repeal conflicting laws and for other purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Is there objection to that motion? Without objection, it is granted. Recognize Senator from the 31st for a motion.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that Senate Bill 181 be withdrawn from the Committee on Education and Youth and committed to the Committee on Higher Education.
Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 181 by Senator Anna Vitarte, the 31st, and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 1 of Title 20 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated related to general provisions relative to education so as to provide that public schools and public post-secondary institutions shall not accept funding from or enter into contracts with foreign adversaries, to provide for definitions, to provide for related matters, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Is there objection to the motion? Hearing none, motion is granted. Moving on to the rules calendar. Secretary reads Senate Bill 13.
Senate Bill 13 by Senator Summers of the 13th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 23 of Title 50 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated related to the Georgia Environmental Finance Authority so as to authorize the authority to finance and perform certain duties in connection with projects related to natural gas facilities, to revise definitions, to provide for rules and regulations, to provide for limited liability, to provide for related matters, to provide for an effective date, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Regulated Industries and Utilities recommends that this bill do pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Cowser, the 46th District Chairman. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Recognize Senator from the 13th.
Well, good morning, colleagues. I bring you a very simple bill today that affects my district down in rural South Georgia. Basically, Senate Bill 13 is allowing natural gas to be added to things that GEFA, the Georgia Environmental Finance Authority, can offer low financing rates for. We've got some communities in South Georgia, especially Coffee County, that's literally, which is Douglas, city of Douglas, literally out of gas. They cannot have any more room to add more industry in their community, and they need to redo the lines and bring in more capacity. And this will start over in the Albany-Douglas area. The line runs lateral from Albany-Douglas area all the way to Douglas. So what they're asking for is to be able to increase the amount of capacity by getting low interest loans to be able to go in there and redo the facilities. And that's basically all that's all Senate Bill 13 is. All it is. Mr. President, I will yield for questions.
You have no questions, Senator.
I would ask you all for favorable support of this bill for South Georgia. Thank you.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair hears none. Is there objection to the previous question being ordered? Chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. Questions on the passage of the bill. All those in favor vote yea. All those opposed, nay. Secretary, unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 42, the nays are 11. This bill, having received requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Secretary read SB 72.
Senate Bill 72 by Senator Bratz of the 6th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 52 of Title 31 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated related to terminally ill patients' right to try investigational drugs, biological products, and devices so as to expand access to individualized investigational treatments to patients who have severely debilitating or life-threatening illnesses, to provide for definitions, to provide for eligibility criteria, to provide for a written informed consent, to allow certain manufacturers or eligible facilities to make available individualized investigational treatments, to provide that coverage is not mandatory, to prohibit the sanctions against a physician's license, to provide for exemption of liability for certain charges, to provide for related matters, to provide for a short title, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Health and Human Services recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Watson, the 1st District Chairman. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Health and Human Services offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 72, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 52 of Title 31 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated related to terminally ill patients' right to try investigational drugs, biological products, and devices, so as to expand access to individualized investigational treatments to patients and for other purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
I recognize the senator for the 6th. How are you doing, Chairman? You look good.
Thank you, Mr. President. I feel good. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring to you Senate Bill 72. And this bill simply allows terminally ill patients a right to try investigative drugs or biological products and devices that have not fully gone through the FDA process. They've been through phase 1 of the FDA process, but have not completely gone through, because most of these individualized investigational treatments are very specific and specialized to a very small number of people. Therefore, it does not make financial sense for them to go through the full FDA process. And the problem we're facing in this state, if the good senator from the 14th would pay attention, he would learn that people are having to go to foreign countries and to foreign states like New York, California. They're traveling all over the country to go get these treatments when our citizens that we represent could stay right here at home to get the treatment that they need. With that, I will yield for questions.
You do have one question, Senator. I recognize the senator from the 14th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does the senator yield?
The senator does.
Senator, is it not true that I support your bill so vociferously, so overwhelmingly, that I didn't even have an afterthought of needing to deliberate on it, and that's why I got distracted? Isn't that true, Senator?
I believe that to be true, and I also believe it to be true you are easily distracted.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I yield the well.
Senator has yielded the well. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair hears none. Is there objections to the previous question being ordered? Chair hears none. Previous question is ordered. Questions on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objections to the adoption of the committee substitute? Hearing none, the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. Report of committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. Questions on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor will vote yea. Opposed, nay. Secretary, unlock the machine. You know, that's the first time all session we've had 56 to 0 right there. Even on roll call, we hadn't had 56 to 0. So, state your inquiry.
Is it not true if you ain't first, you're last?
Okay. 56-0, that's pretty good, Senator. All right, on the passage of the bill, the yeas are 56 and nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. Good job, Senator. Secretary read Senate Bill 125.
Senate Bill 125 by Senator Walker, the 20th, and others. The bill is being entitled an act to amend Chapter 15 and Title 43 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated related to professional engineers and land surveyors so as to decouple the sequential order of experience and examination requirements to provide for related matters, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Regulated Industries and Utilities recommends that this bill do pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Cowser of the 46th District, Chairman. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Recognize the Senator from the 20th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I don't have any good Ricky Bobby references this morning, and I do need to be quick because the senator from the 21st is a busy man, and he's got some pressing things he needs to get to, and I told him I'd do this in a hurry, but I want you all to understand the bill. If you've worked on any projects, building development type projects in Georgia lately, you know that one of the things that kind of slows you down is trying to get a professional engineer to help you out and get your plans approved and all that. We've got a growing economy, thanks to our governor and good leadership in the House and the Senate. A lot of development, a lot of growth, and we have a shortage of workforce, including professional engineers. Current law requires the engineers to complete all of their field experience prior to taking their PE or professional engineer exams. The industry believes that if they can allow that exam to be taken earlier, right after they complete their academic work, that they'll have a higher pass-fail rate, and that will help us get more people into the workforce in the engineering field. So all this does, it does not reduce any of the requirements to become a professional engineer. It simply allows the timing of the exam to be taken when they finish their academic coursework. So if you look on line 18, line 25, and line 32 and line 40, it just removes the word subsequently pass, changes it to pass, to allow them to take the PE exam earlier in their process. Mr. President, if there are any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them.
You have no questions, Senator.
All right, I would appreciate favorable consideration. Thank you.
Does any other senator wish to rise for or against the measure? Is there objection to the previous question being ordered? Chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. Report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. Questions on the passage of the bill. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. Secretary, unlock the machine. Got everybody here today. All right. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 56, the nays are 0. This bill having received requisite constitutional majority is therefore passed. Moving on to Senate Bill 28. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 28 by Senator Dolezal, the 27th, and others, the bill to be entitled an act to amend Titles 28, 31, and 50 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated related to the General Assembly, Health, and State Government, respectively, so as to provide for procedures and processes concerning the enactment of legislation and the adoption of rules and regulations, to provide for related matters, to provide a short title, to provide effective dates, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Economic Development and Tourism recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Beach, to the 21st District Chairman. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Economic Development and Tourism offers the following amendment to Senate Bill 28, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Titles 28, 31, and 50 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated related to the General Assembly, Health, and State Government, respectively, so as to provide for procedures and processes concerning the enactment of legislation and the adoption of rules and regulations, to provide for definitions, to provide for the preparation and submission of small business impact analyses for bills introduced during sessions of the General Assembly, to provide for contracting, to provide for the revision of small business impact analyses, to provide for legislative construction, to revise procedures concerning the adoption of administrative rules, and for other purposes. Mr. President, the minority report to Senate Bill 28 has been attached. Mr. President, Senator Dolezal, the 27th, offers the following amendment number 1 to amend the Senate Committee on Economic Development and Tourism substitute to Senate Bill 28 by inserting after any bill on line 29 the following. Provided, however, that no member of the General Assembly who is not the Speaker of the House of Representatives or the chairperson of a standing committee shall be permitted to request a small business impact analysis for more than 3 bills during any one period that the General Assembly is not in session. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Senator from the 27th, the senator from the 14th says he feels good about us going 3 for 3 now. 56 votes. He's all on board.
Thank you, Mr. President. The senator from the 14th and I think alike on so many issues, and I actually agree with him on this issue that we're going to go for another 56-0 on this one. So, minority report looks fantastic, but I think you'll be so compelled, Senator, by my presentation that even you may flip your vote. Senators, I bring to you Senate Bill 28. This is the Red Tape Rollback Act of 2025. Last year, we passed a very similar bill out of the Senate. There's one substantive change, I would say, to this version, but we passed that version out 40-13. The bill then went to the House, where a lot of good bills go to die, and it was actually a new verb I learned from my senator friend I referenced earlier is the verb housed, and the bill was housed and came back to us unrecognizable, and so did not get across the finish line. But, Mr. President, your staff has worked tirelessly on this bill, and I am honored to have worked alongside of them. This bill really comes from the recognition that we do have a need at all levels of government to look at our rulemaking processes, to look at the rules that are on the books, and to ensure that the rules that are on the books are still meeting their intended purposes. And very often, rules get layered on top of rules, and the original intent of the rule gets lost, and so this bill is really a 5-part bill to ensure that Georgia remains the #1 state for business. I'll highlight those parts of the bills, and I'm happy to answer any questions. The first part of the bill on lines 26-92 introduces, just like last year's bill did, the small business impact analysis. And I liken this bill to something that we're all familiar with, and that is a fiscal note. And this has DOA and OPB produce a small business impact analysis when it is requested. And that analysis does a number of things to look at the cost of providing goods and services, the availability of costs and cost of workers, industry competition and consumer choice, and potential cost of compliance as it relates specifically to small business. Small businesses are unique in the state of Georgia. They employ the vast majority of Georgians. They may not have a lot of lobbyists in the hallways, but they are the lifeblood for the Georgia economy. And this section of this bill looks to ensure that our rulemaking process keeps small businesses at the forefront of our minds in the legislative process. The second thing that this bill does is it introduces the concept of an economic impact analysis This is the new portion of this bill. And this bill requires an economic impact analysis when a projected rule, now I'm talking about rules now, not laws, when a rule is projected to cost $1 million or more over the course of 5 years. This is the exact identical rule that has been in place in the state of Florida since 2010. And so we have some examples as to how that has worked there. And I'm happy to talk about that in just a second. The third part of this bill deals with our, being the General Assembly's, objection process when we want to object to a rule. The current rules around the objection process allow standing committees, when they're informed of rules, to object to those rules. If they object to those rules can be stayed until the legislature is back in session. And what this change makes here is we say that if a rule is objected to, that rule is deemed to be withdrawn unless the promulgating agency files a request to have that rule essentially litigated at the General Assembly level. We then would come into session and discuss the efficacy of that rule. If 2/3 of each of the chambers vote to ratify that rule becomes law, 2/3 being a veto-proof majority. If it's simply a majority of both chambers, it then requires the signature of the governor. If the ratification process does not pass both chambers or is vetoed by the governor, that rule does not go into effect. Everything that I just discussed deals with the rules and the objection process for rules that do not meet the $1 million threshold. For those rules that do meet the $1 million threshold, that do require this new economic impact analysis to be done, those rules require ratification by the General Assembly. So those rules are deemed to be stayed until the General Assembly comes back into session, and then we go through the process of ratifying those rules. The last thing that the bill does, and this was in last year's version, although we slightly modified the year count. We require essentially a 4-year spring cleaning of the rules. So we require every agency every 4 years to look at the rules they have promulgated, to ask significant questions, important questions around those rules. Are there less expensive ways that these things can be accomplished? Are these rules still accomplishing the goals for which they were originally intended? And they then submit that as part of essentially an internal audit of their rules. I think it's important to note here, there's been some mischaracterization of this bill, and the agencies do their own audit of the bill. It is not an external entity that does the audit. That is done internally. And then lastly, one change from last year's piece of legislation on line 428 to 487 recognizes that the constitutional officers will be the ones to conduct the review, the rulemaking, or the rule review every 4 years for the rules that fall under their jurisdiction. Last year, we kind of had that all buttoned up in one section of the bill, and we recognized that we needed to parse that out for the constitutional officers. Mr. President, that is a summation of the bill. I'm sure there's some questions. I'm happy to answer those, and I know there's some discussion as well. We may want to get to other senators during this time.
You do have one question, Senator. Recognize the senator from the 10th.
Thank you, Mr. President. When the senator yield?
I do.
Senator, I know in this bill you create a standing committee. Is that correct?
A standing committee?
Yes.
No, sir. There's no standing committee created in this bill.
It's a committee in the General Assembly.
Correct. So what the current law in the state of Georgia requires that when rules are promulgated, they are submitted to the chairman of the existing standing committee. So I'll use myself as an example. Currently, if the Department of Transportation promulgates rules, they submit those to myself. The first thing that I do when I receive those, I think this is a best practice for any chairman, is I send those out to all members of the Transportation Committee. And we then have the ability to meet and object to those rules. I will tell you, as long as I've been part of that committee, that has not happened. So it is rare that that would happen, but that is a lever that we're able to pull. We don't change that in this bill, Senator. The only thing that we do change is what happens when that objection is filed. And currently, that objection, if it is filed, the rule is stayed. And under this bill, the rule is deemed withdrawn unless the agency files a petition, essentially, and then the rule is discussed when we get back into session.
Senator Further?
I do.
Senator, I believe in your response to some of the issues that was raised by the Democratic Party that you mentioned that this bill was Doge light. Can you explain to me what you mean by those comments?
I think what I said was this bill is in the spirit of Doge, but functionally it's very different from Doge. So what this bill recognizes is that if left unchecked, rules tend to layer on top of rules on top of rules, and before you know it, you don't necessarily know what those rules are. And as you know, Senator, very often we come back into session and we have bills before us to either dissolve things or change things or deregulate things. This places that onus as well at the agency level and requires the agency to look at that every 4 years. And so it gives a mechanism for us to work alongside of these agencies to make sure that the rules are accomplishing the goals and best serving all citizens of Georgia.
Senator Yield?
I do.
Senator, when I think of Doge, I think of someone taking a chainsaw to slashing the budget. And when you mentioned that term, Doge, in my head, I conjured up an idea of the General Assembly trying to usurp the power of agency heads and basically trying to dictate to agency head what the terms of their procedures and processes they should operate under. Is that what this bill does, Senator?
No, in fact, this bill opens the door for discussion, and in the process of the agency heads looking at their rules, you'll find it on, I'm going to try to quickly find the line for you here. Yes, there it is on line 405. It opens the door for the public to speak to those rules. As we discussed in committee, Senator, my family went through the process in the last 6 months of starting a new business in our community, and we ran up against a difficult process in getting that business open. And so my family now, under this bill, would have the ability to come in and have a conversation with the agency heads to discuss what the process was in starting a new small business in our community and how some state regulations slowed us down probably more than the agency even intended for it to do.
Thank the Senator for the yield.
I do.
Senator, doesn't this vest new powers in the General Assembly that we've not had before?
We don't have the ability, apart from a constitutional amendment, to vest new powers in the General Assembly. The powers that are vested in the General Assembly are done so by the Georgia Constitution. What we are doing is we are recognizing the powers that we do have under the Constitution and ensuring that we have a seat at the table as the elected officials who are closest to the people, that we have a seat at the table to ensure that the administrative state is not doing things that are unintended or that are making it onerous for our citizens and our constituents to start, run, and grow their businesses in the state of Georgia.
Senator, is that a yes or no? Because that's the answer I would like to have.
Could you ask me the question
vest
again?
New powers in the General Assembly
No,
and a
it
body
does
that
not
we
vest
didn't
new-
have before?
We don't. The Constitution is what the Constitution is, and this is not a bill that changes the Constitution.
So you're saying this process is already somewhere in the state's constitution that would allow us to do this?
Well, this is not a process that is in the Constitution in either one of these, either the absence of or the existence of it. As you know, Senator, the Constitution vests powers in the General Assembly, and this bill does not enhance or change the power, does not change the Constitution at all.
Senator, I'm not suggesting it's changing the Constitution. The question I ask is, does this vest new powers?
And what I'm
in
telling you,
this
Senator,
body
is the
that we
only
didn't
way that
have
new
before?
powers can be vested in the General Assembly is through a change to the Constitution.
Senator, further yield?
Yes.
Senator, when you look at your legislation, you define in here small businesses as any business with 300 or fewer employees. Is that correct?
Correct. Currently, the law recognizes small businesses as businesses who are not dominant in their field, who are privately owned and are smaller than 100 employees. This changes that to 300. What the current law also does is requires agencies, when they're looking at their rules, to allow decreased regulation and decreased paperwork for small businesses. So what this does is this broadens the net of what is a small business and allows more businesses to be under the consideration of the agencies for those reduced regulations as they're making their rules.
So for a business with less than 300 employees, and if they are part of a franchise system, would they be included?
If they're part of a franchise system, if they're privately owned, yes.
So you're not looking at the individual business, you're looking at those underneath a banner of a particular franchise like Hobby Lobby or something, or any dealership?
It would look at the entity level, what the ownership is of the entity, whether there's a franchise agreement or not. I don't believe that's of consideration in that question of whether.
Let me be a little bit more specific. My business has less than 300 employees, but I'm part of a Ford franchise system. Be because of that connection to Ford, would I then fall under this legislation?
I can't ask you a question. I would hypothetically say that if you own 100% of your business, you are not dominant in your field, and you are privately owned, which is where that first part comes from, then it's my reading of the bill that you would be, yes, included in that, in the small business definition.
So potentially any small business as part of any kind of franchise system would be subject to this legislation, though the business is independently owned and independently operated. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, yes. And again, we're not changing the definition of small business other than the number of employees.
Senator, what I just mentioned is that my business does not have 300 employees, so I wouldn't meet that threshold. But would I meet, just because of franchise system, there's other franchisees that would make me qualify? Is that what I'm hearing?
I would be happy to confirm that with the agency with you, but that's not a portion of the bill that we're changing, so I haven't done a deep dive on the franchise law in the state to give you a definitive answer. I'm telling you what my opinion is, but I leave room for confirmation on that.
Senator, did the agency write this bill, or did you write it?
I wrote the bill, Senator, but like I've told you 3 times now, I did not change that section of the law.
Senator, let me just move on for a moment. You talk about businesses controlled is dominated in its field, and you had a conjunctive in here, and must be independently owned and operated.
Yeah,
Please explain to me how you can be dominant in your field and independently owned and operated, or give me an example where I'm not dominant, but I am independently owned and operated. Would I still come under this bill?
I'm not sure I understood the question, but I'll take my best stab at what I think you're asking. And again, this is the current small business of a small definition in Georgia law. It's not being introduced as a proposed new definition of a small business. The only thing that's changing is the employee count. And I thought you said is dominant, but the code section actually reads is not dominant. So that test, I'm not exactly sure how the courts interpret that test or even how the agencies interpret that test, but it is independently owned and operated. I think we all know what that means. And then is not dominant in its field. So I would think of, for example, a pest control company. I would think of an HVAC company. I would think of a lot of the service businesses that we see where there's a lot of them that may have more than 100 employees, but they're one of maybe 10 businesses even in their own region who are providing that service. I think that's what the language that was, as it was defined by someone before us, is what they endeavored to do there.
So take, for example, Servpro, that has kind of a very similar setup as franchisees of other businesses do. How would, in that particular, they could be, as you say in your language, and must be independently owned and operated, but they may not be dominant in a particular county, as an example, or a particularly larger geographical area. How would this bill apply to them?
Well, again, if they're not dominant in their field, then they will be captured in the small business definition, which means that the agencies, when they're making rules like they're required to do right now, they need to say, is there anything that we can do to make this rule easier for small business? And if there is, then the agencies are compelled to do so. And what we're changing here is we're changing that number count from 100 to 300.
Senator, I understand, but I'm just trying to verify whether or not this legislation, because I think it's important that businesses that are franchised, regardless of what kind of type of franchise they hold, should understand whether or not this legislation would apply to them. You spoke earlier that you did know if a franchisee, that this legislation would apply to them, and that's what I'm trying to understand. Given an example,
you've asked me
like
the same question 9 different ways, and I've given you my answer 9 different ways. Perhaps we should have a sidebar, and we can get more specific on it and have conversations offline about that. If you have any other questions about a different topic, I'd be happy to answer those. If not, there may be other senators that want to ask a question.
Senator, just a couple of final questions. Is there any expertise, if I was serving on this committee, that I should have in being able to try and make determinations for the various agencies that we have across this state?
Absolutely, Senator, which is why I was happy to answer every question that you had in committee, and would have been happy to answer any questions you had from the time of committee until today. I don't know that you've asked me any of those, but if you had, I would have been happy to do any due diligence I could have if I didn't have the answer.
I'm sorry, Senator, perhaps I didn't word the question well enough. What I'm trying to ask is, this committee, if I was asked to serve on this committee, what kind of experience or expertise would you expect me
Senator,
to have?
you keep talking about a new
given
committee. What committee are you talking about?
Those that you have created in this legislation.
Senator, I've told you already, I've not created a committee in this legislation. A standing committee is an existing committee. Economic development, transportation, I'm looking for different chairmen in the room, agriculture. Those are the existing committees in the Senate. They have theirs in the House. The way that it happens currently under Georgia law, and I'm sure you've received these emails, is a chairman of a committee, a standing committee, so again, transportation, receives notification under Georgia law from rulemaking agencies when they write new rules. That's the committees that we're speaking about. Those committees today under Georgia law have the ability to object to those rules. If those committees, transportation is, in my case, were to object to those laws on both of those committees, then that rule under current Georgia law is stayed. So let's just say it happens in August. That bill is stayed until we come into session. There is then a process under Georgia law for those standing committees to meet to discuss that rule. We keep that, I would say, 80% the same in this bill. What we're changing in this bill is that rather than staying that rule when it's objected to, the bill is deemed to be withdrawn, and the onus is then, rather on the General Assembly, the onus is on the agency to answer a few questions that are spelled out in the bill as to why they think the rule is helpful. They can then petition the General Assembly to pass that rule. And we have the same ability to pass that rule as we have the rules that are stayed under the current structure. But I want to be very clear, because we did discuss this in committee, we've discussed it a couple times on the floor today. There is not a new committee that is created under this bill. There is not a new agency that is created under this bill. There is not a new government employee that is created under this bill. This bill increases the dialogue, if you will, between the General Assembly and the agencies in the rulemaking process, but that's all that this bill does.
Senator, thank you for the explanation. I apologize for the misunderstanding between the committee and the standing committee.
Sure, nope, that's okay.
To me, it's all the same. I guess my question then would be, is there a particular expertise, because what you're asking the standing committees to do in any of those committees is to insert themselves between a decision that someone at an agency has made and to potentially overrule that decision. So my question is, what is the expertise that you would expect someone on this standing committee to have in order to be able to make an informed decision?
I think I better understand your question now. And I would point to you again to the fact that this is a current process that is outlined in the law. So we are not all of a sudden looking at the committees and investing some sort of new invented power on them. This is power that we have had as long as I've been here. I'm not sure if it's as long as you've been here or not. We would need to look into that. But certainly what these committees have is, I know as the chairman of transportation, I receive phone calls, emails, text messages, because my phone number is public, from people all around the state with input on different transportation issues, input on different things that we may be considering in the committee. So I would tell you that we have expertise that we learn here. Some of us bring expertise, certainly you do, as it relates to transportation. You bring expertise into this General Assembly. But what we also have is a connectivity point to the citizens and the business owners and the employees in the state of Georgia that the agency rulemakers may not have. You know, we run for office, we send out mailers, we put signs out. Certainly everyone in your community knows who Senator Jones is. And they have the ability, and they know, a lot of them probably have your phone number. So what we have, I think, in addition to the expertise that we gain as being part of these committees, is we have connectivity with the people that have to live under these rules. And so what this does is gives them a touch point to reach out to us and raise a flag if there is something coming from an agency that they may have an objection to for whatever reason.
Senator, further, yeah?
I do.
Senator, I understand.
I'm running out of time, though, Senator.
And I hear you say we already have this in place, and I can't help but to think, then why do we need this legislation? Wouldn't it be better off to leave the process we have in place, as well as leave this up to the executive branch to make?
So I think that this bill does enhances the existing rules in a couple of different ways. One, it does clarify what happens when those committees make an objection, but it also recognizes that not all rules are created equal. So I'll give you an example. In Florida passed a very similar bill back in 2010. And as it relates to the economic impact analysis, and when I say not all rules are created equal, what this bill does is recognize that some rules are easy to comply with, other rules may be very expensive to comply with, perhaps even unintentionally.
Senator, is that a yes or no?
I'm-
'Cause that's what I'm asking. Wouldn't it be
Well,
better off, yes or no, to leave
Well, no,
this
Senator,
under
if
the
I thought that
executive
we'd be
branch?
better off living under the existing regulatory mechanisms, I wouldn't have brought this bill. But I'm explaining to you, and frankly, I would like to get through my explanation because you have a lot of misconceptions about this bill. And you've asked me questions this morning that I've already clarified. You've said things to the cameras that were, which I clearly clarified in committee. So let me walk through what the bill does, and maybe I'll get your vote. This recognizes that not all rules are created equally, and that for those rules that are expensive and that they're over $1 million to comply with, it allows it requires actually the agencies to submit that information to us and requires us to ratify it. In the 15 years that Florida has lived under that methodology, 99.5% of the rules have not met that threshold. And that's probably twofold. It's one, that most rules probably didn't meet that threshold beforehand, but it also probably has in the back of the agency's mind, if we pass a rule that is going to be expensive, it has this additional ratification requirement. So let's look at some ways to make that rule less expensive to comply with, which I think, Senator, would be something that you and I both would agree on, is that these agencies should try to make these rules as effective, but also as easy to comply with as possible for all the citizens of Georgia.
Senator, I understand your concern and your issues, and thank you for that explanation. But I've not had a single member from the community come to me and say that the agencies and the way they have handled these charges, if you will, has not been reasonable with their particular industry. Certainly when I speak for mine, I don't know of a single case where we've been indifferent to a decision made by a particular agency, or in particular we didn't agree with it. So I don't understand the problem that you're trying to solve with this legislation. Please explain
Senator,
that to
I've
me.
talked to lobbyists from your agency who have a particular concern this session around the TOPS and the way that TOPS are distributed around the state of Georgia. I was part of a couple of committee hearings in the off session. I don't think that DOR was nefarious in the way that they put their TOPS rule into place, but it actually is something that specifically the franchise dealers have come to us and said this is a rule that we think needs to be looked at, and we've worked alongside of them. Now, you may say, well, that's great. That's what we're saying in the Minority Report. We should do this kind of one-off and do that through legislation. I'm saying I think it's helpful to have those agencies have conversations with the public every 4 years to identify those things, perhaps on a more regular status, because while the franchise car dealers have lobbyists down here, there's a lot of there's a lot of industries who do not. And this provides a free mechanism for those business owners to communicate with the agencies. And to the extent that the agencies are able to make those rules less onerous, then that's something that we should be celebrating.
And why not have those conversations before you even attempt to pass something as egregious as this?
I don't think this is egregious, Senator. I think that's a gross mischaracterization of what the bill's doing. There's 20 states that are adopting these bills. Indiana and Wisconsin, Kansas, and Florida already have them, and I don't think that it's been so egregious that Florida is having mass migration outside the state. If anything, they've got an electromagnet where it seems like everybody wants to move to Florida.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
You do have a few more questions, Senator. Recognize the senator from the 8th.
Thank you, Mr. President. The senator to you.
I do.
Senator, is it not true that I often talk about the regulatory environment in this country?
Senator, you have a unique expertise around the regulatory environment, not only in this country, but how rules in other countries make it difficult for Georgia and Americans to compete in our current unfair trade environment as well.
Senator, further to you.
I do.
Senator, is it not true that in this country, we just had an appropriations meeting this morning. Is it not true that government doesn't create wealth? It is the small businesses across our state, individuals that take risk, that start businesses, that create commerce, that government taxes, that funds our state. Is that not true?
I would agree with that 100%.
So, Senator, do you further yield?
I do.
Is it not true that the spirit of this bill is trying to make sure that, say, regulations that came out from the previous administration, it was a proposal that was going to put regulations on portable generators, Portable generators, you know what else is also a portable generator? Is a welder. It would have virtually made every welder, portable welder on a service truck in the United States no longer legal. So, you know, when we look at regulations, Senator, is it not true that we need to do everything that we can to limit roadblocks for the small businesses and entrepreneurs across this state so that they can create commerce that the government taxes so that we can fund the budget that we just talked about this morning? Is that not true, Senator?
I would agree 100%. I would also add to that, you know, I think about my brother who was a welder and had one of those welding machines on the back of his truck for a number of years. And the rule that you're mentioning, you know, there may have been a bullseye on generators for some reason. I don't know why. I don't know about the specific rule, but I think that's illustrative of what often happens, and that you get things caught up in these regulations that were never intended to get caught up in them. And what this 4-year review process allows is it allows the public to speak into that directly with the agencies, and it forces the agencies to the table to have that conversation with the public, where we may catch one of those things, we may catch a dozen of those things, but to the extent that we probably should catch all of those things.
Senator Feather Yield.
I do.
Is it not true, Senator, that we're the closest to the people? Not necessarily the rule makers, but we're the closest to the people, that we have to go home to our districts every day and answer to our constituents?
I agree. You know, we heard defense of career politicians in this last week as it related to term limits and those in D.C., and I didn't speak to that, but I was struck by the fact that so many of us in this chamber have expertise in so many different areas, and we do go home certainly every weekend, but often every evening for some of us, and people see us at the Publix, they see us at the soccer fields on a Saturday, and it gives them a direct conduit to us, and as you know, they take us up on it. And it's one of the joys, I think, for all of us in this role is that we have direct, regular contact with our constituents back home.
Well, Senator, thank you for bringing this legislation forward. And as someone that's very acutely aware of the regulatory environment, I'm glad that this legislation is making sure that we as a state are doing everything we can to help our small businesses be successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Senator, Mr. President, I see the yellow light on. I'll take one more and then be on my way.
All right. Well, you just have one more question. Senator from the 19th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Yield.
I do.
Senator, I just heard you mention generators. Are you aware that generators are the only thing that kept my refrigerator going for 14 days this past fall? You mentioned agencies. I just wanted to see if you were aware. Your bill, thank you for this. It's been a pleasure to work with you on it. The question I have, in some of the agencies in our state I do not think are covered by this rulemaking authority you already have. Would you be open in the future, not today obviously, but to an amendment that possibly brought all agencies under?
I'd certainly be open to working with you on that and look forward to the opportunity to do so.
Thank you. And further, you may have not seen the minority report yet. Have you had a chance to look at it?
I glanced through it, but I didn't get a chance to study it closely yet. It seems like there's one of these on our desk every day now. I remember when it used to be maybe one or two a session.
The minority report characterizes this bill as an attack on government. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Maybe I'll wait till they present the minority report to let them explain more what they mean by that and respond to that at a later date. Because given the dialogue I've had with the Senator from the 10th, I'm not sure how it can be construed that way.
Will you yield for one more question?
I do.
The last paragraph of the minority report says that they oppose this because they want to restore faith in functions of government. My question to you, Senator, is do you believe that this bill helps restore faith in the legitimate functions of government, and rather than helping to stop what the report refers to as agencies that are being crippled, helps protect the public that's being crippled by undue burdens that make their job harder?
I would imagine that if the public for the first time ever has the opportunity to meet with agencies under the law every 4 years and discuss things that the rules and how they're impacting them, I think that the public would welcome that and it would restore their trust. Mr. President, I yield the well.
Senator, before you yield the well, did you have an opportunity to speak to your amendment that you
presented? Yes, sir.
This
amendment comes out of some discussion in committee and the recognition that under the current bill, a senator, if they wanted to clog up the system, could just request a small business impact analysis for every single bill that is out there. This limits that to 3 for non-chairmen, just to ensure that that does not happen. That was a great catch from one of the authors of the minority report nonetheless. So a little bit of bipartisanship in the amendment. And with that, Mr. President, I yield the well.
Senators yielded. Senator from the 49th, I know you had your button on to ask a question. Do you wish to speak? No. Senator from the 41st, would you like to speak to the bill?
Thank you, Mr. President. The real question today is, are we going to allow cuts to the very programs that thousands of Georgians across our state rely upon in the name of rollbacks? Rollbacks that will hit our local governments and their business communities with layoffs and instability and unease. Rollbacks that will in reality lead to a less efficient, more chaotic process that will only change Georgia's economy for the worse. Are we going to fire hardworking Georgians who spent years giving back to our state, all to send a message? The irony of this bill is not lost on us in the minority party. Considering the fact that any red tape that's been put in place was created by Republicans who have been in complete control of our state government for the last 2 decades. How ironic that we're now all of a sudden claiming the need to cut the fat of government bureaucracy after 20 years of Republicans adding the fat in. I want to be clear about something. My colleagues talk about people being burdened by the rules of agencies. But when I talk to my constituents, no one is complaining about rules. Instead, they talk about phones that go unanswered, emails that are not responded, agencies not being able to provide the very things that they are called to because they are underfunded and understaffed. Our agencies are not crippled by rules. They are crippled by our lack of funding. They are crippled by our lack of staffing. I'll say some agencies that my senators I know are familiar with because, like me, you get calls from your constituents because these folks don't answer the phones. Department of Labor, Voc Rehab, Corrections, DFACS, DHS. How many of us in this room have had to call and ask for a representative to help us because those departments, those agencies are not responding? Again, it is not their rules. It is because they are chronically underfunded and understaffed. Asking our agencies to add another task, another burden every 4 years does not help them or our people. We cannot take power away from our agencies and burden them even more and expect Georgians to be better off. Instead, we will continue to have our constituents calling us because they can't get the things that they need, that they deserve, that our agencies were created for because we've chronically underfunded and understaffed them. I want to be clear and I want to repeat, any red tape that is here, any extra fat that my colleagues are talking about, it was created by Republicans. This is a house of cards that you all built, and now you're seeking to blow it down. And who will be harmed by that? Georgians. With that, I yield the well.
Before we have the minority report, does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Senator from the 10th? Just stand by, Senator from the 14th.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of this body. I was not going to come up here and speak from the well, but I got really, really confused listening to the senator from the 27th as he described this bill. One of the reasons why I got confused is I asked him, what impact would this have on franchise businesses? You see, there's a definition in here that he put where you have to have 300 employees, and you can read that definition for yourself. But that's the problem, that's the issue that's problematic for a lot of businesses in Georgia. Even though they may be independently owned and operated, they're still part of a much larger brand where there's a lot more employees, and this bill does not make any kind of allowance for anything like that. Another reason why I object to this legislation and would encourage to vote no against it is because it creates an unnecessary step that this body, this chamber, this General Assembly has not had before. We've now inserted the General Assembly into the rulemaking for agency heads. And if we're going to do that, then why do we need an executive if we're going to make the decisions on behalf of the executive branch of state government? I asked my colleague from the 27th about comments he made about DOGE and whether or not this is akin to the process that we see up in D.C. where an unelected official is taking a chainsaw to slashing federal governments across the nation. Even those here in Georgia, from our VAs to our CDCs, you name the agency that had been cut. And he said, well, trying to explain that he really didn't mean it that way, but that's the way that I took it. He also said I made some miscomments at my press conference, and I said, tell me what those comments were. This is a power grab. Plain and simple, this is DOGE coming to Georgia. And the consequences of this bill could be far, far outreaching long after we've left this General Assembly and we've left this body. Folks, this isn't about efficiency, and I thought the Republican Party stood for efficiency, not just in federal government, but state government as well. As a matter of fact, I think this extra step in the process would create, as my colleague has already said, a lot more inefficiency in state government. Another reason why I oppose this bill is I asked the author of this legislation, is there any particular expertise that any member serving on this standing committee should have? Folks, we're talking about the agencies across Georgia, from environmental to those taking care of elderly. The range is everything that's been impacted by the decisions made by state government. That's the problem I have with this bill. And I don't know of any of us that would have the expertise that you currently see in those that have been hired to fill these agencies' positions. I don't know too many of us that have advanced degrees that would require a certain level of expertise to look at environmental hazards and the changes in our environmental codes that would impact my business and that of many others across this state. I don't know what that expertise would be, and if anyone in this chamber has it, good luck to you, and I hope you're on the standing committee, because it doesn't specify in this bill what kind of expertise you would need to have to serve on that standing committee. Folks, this is a solution in search of a problem in Georgia, and I suggest to you that we vote this bill down. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well, unless someone would like to ask a question.
You do have one question, Senator. Recognize the Senator from the 49th.
Thank you, Senator. Do you yield the well?
Gladly.
Yield the well?
Gladly, absolutely.
Isn't it true that the regulatory code has grown at least 13% in the state of Georgia since 1965?
If the senator so state, I don't have that data in front of me.
Isn't it true that as a small businessman yourself, you evaluate your business and the way that you do business and handle your day-to-day at least every 4 years?
Senator, that is not correct. I evaluate my business daily, and I think anyone that operates any kind of business in this state should do the same.
Thank you.
You're more than welcome.
You have no further questions, Senator.
I yield the well.
Recognize the Senator from the 37th to speak to the bill.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, I want to bring this right back to what this bill really does. There's been claims of all kinds of things. There's been claims of all-out assault on government and agencies, an assault on customer service, assault on all kinds of things. But what this bill does is something that we were sent here to do. You know, one thing I think is noteworthy, I was talking to someone the other day about the Judiciary Committee, the work that's done in room 307. The Judiciary Committee is unique among our committees because the things that are enacted in Judiciary Committee put into black letter law the language that our court cases, criminal and civil setting is hinged on. Every other committee, however, puts a framework in place where the letters and the words people live by are not in statute, not enacted by us, but they're in rule and regulation. I say that, I think it's an important distinction to understand. That's the heart of what this bill does. This bill creates accountability to the people that are writing the words and the sentences and the paragraphs and the volumes that govern the lives of our citizens in rulemaking. What this bill does is it puts accountability for the functional laws, the rules that govern people every single day, more in the hands of those that they elected to represent them. The senator from the 27th said a little while ago that the genius of this place is that we live in our communities. We shop next to folks. I was in Publix yesterday with a gentleman I've known for years. We're talking in the checkout line at Publix on Wade Green Road in Ackworth about some issues. He's known as state senator for a lot of years. We're there and available to people. We're the ones, the people in this room are the ones that were elected to do the lawmaking for people. And when most of the words that govern the lives and the businesses of Georgians is in rulemaking, Georgians need more accountability for that process. This does not upend customer service, does not upend the people that will answer or not answer the telephone for you in agencies, but it puts accountability for the laws that govern regular Georgians more in the hands of those that Georgians elected to do this work. That's what this bill's about. And that's why every member, both of the majority and the minority party, should support this bill. With that, Mr. President, yield the well.
Recognize Senator from the 53rd.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think this is probably one of the best pieces of legislation we've had all session. All right? 56 senators on the last two. I thought maybe we could have 56 on this next one too. But the Democrats, I've discovered, I don't know. I don't really know what their principles are anymore. Some of the arguments I've heard make absolutely no sense. The minority report refers to DOGE. There's a piece of paper on all of our desks given to us by the senator from the 14th with Elon Musk's dog on it. And I hear in the media, you know, everybody in the Democratic Party is always beating up on Elon Musk. And they say, well, Elon Musk doesn't understand the numbers. The guy landed a rocket with chopsticks. I think he understands the numbers. They say, well, Elon Musk might get a hold of our Social Security numbers. The guy made his wealth on PayPal and Social Security numbers. So I trust Elon Musk. But I think you're looking at it, Democrats, from the wrong perspective because you're looking at it from the executive branch perspective. And right now, luckily, I like to brag, I'm Trump's floor leader in this Senate sometimes. But the executive branch, nationally, is taking care of business with DOGE. But what this bill does is very different. It does what most of our constituents believe we already do. Hold the executive branch accountable. You see, there's a little family business in my hometown. They were trying to make a campground. They're trying to build a campground. We got tourism. And they were having so much trouble because of the rules and the regulations to build that campground. And they come to me and they said, why in the world does all this exist? And you look at the code section and there's only 2 paragraphs that this General Assembly passed to regulate campgrounds in this state. But the Department of Health and Human Services, they've got like 200 pages that we give them the authority to write over those 2 paragraphs. That's 200 pages of rules and regulations. And my constituents believe that I, as a senator, have a right to go look into those 200 pages. That's what this bill seeks to do. It's very simple. You Democrats are always talking that the Republicans are the worst thing on the earth. Then why do you celebrate and raise up on a pedestal the governor? You don't agree with him, but yet you say his expertise, I heard one senator say, is necessary for this state. No, I think we as a legislature, who our article comes before the executive branch in the Constitution, have more say-so. This should be a very simple yes vote, because you're a legislator. Don't you want to have a say-so in what the governor of the opposing party has to say? I certainly do, and I'm in the same party. The only thing that I don't like on our desk is this amendment. It says we're only limited to 3 bills, unless you're a chairman or the speaker, or I guess maybe another thing in there. But I think we all ought to be able to seek out as much as we would like. I don't like limiting ourselves just to 3 bills. But if that's what it takes you Democrats to light up the board green, then I guess that'll be a good amendment. Mr. President, I'll yield for any questions.
You have one question, Senator.
All right.
Recognize the senator from the 10th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Yield?
Yes, sir.
Senator, what expertise do you have in judging matters for all of the state agencies in Georgia?
All of state agencies, because
Any of them impacted by this
I'm a member of
legislation?
the Republic, Senator. I'm a senator just as you were a senator. Do you think that we as lawmakers ought to have a law degree? I don't believe so. We're a citizen legislature, right? We only go to session 40 days because we're supposed to go out there and make a living in some other means, just as you and I both do.
Senator,
but our
you-
constituents elected us to this position. We are members of the Republic to make those decisions.
Senator Yield?
Sure.
Senator, being an elected official is not expertise. My question to you is, what expertise do you have that will allow you to sit on one of these standing committees and make decisions across our state agencies?
Well, Senator, we can start with transportation. I'm the Secretary of Transportation, and I believe I'm one of 2 legislators in the entire General Assembly who have a Class A CDL driver's license. I think that gives me some level of expertise when it comes to the Transportation Committee. Senator, I'm on the Natural Resources Committee. I own a family farm. It's been in my family for 5 generations. My grandfather taught me how to protect natural resources. I think that leaves me some expertise in natural resources. Comes to interstate cooperation, Senator, I'm the chairman of it. I think I have some level of expertise there because my district borders Alabama and Tennessee, our 2 neighbors, interstate cooperation. Let's see, government oversight. I'm the only senator who ever votes no on anything, it seems like, in this chamber. So government oversight, I like to think I have a little bit of expertise.
Senator, do you have any higher education in any of those areas you just mentioned?
Senator,
Or
I do
advanced
have some higher
degrees?
education. I'm a Georgia Bulldog, graduated with a degree in international affairs and political science, and took all of the esteemed Charles Bullock classes. But
Senator,
Senator,
one-
to your point, I did only make a B in those classes.
Senator, one final question.
Sure.
Are you still a member of the Republican Party?
Sir, yes, I am a member of the Republican Party. I'm not, however, a member of the Majority Caucus. And, you know, I wish the Majority Caucus would invite me back in. Maybe this is a great time to make that announcement public. I would love to be a part of the Majority Caucus. I'll yield for any more questions.
You have no more questions.
Thank you, Mr.
Senator.
President.
And you are the definition of government oversight. I can tell you that right now. We wouldn't have any problems if it all was looked after like the senator looks after it. All right, any other, oh, Senator from the 51st. Got a couple more.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. This sure is a hard act to follow, following the senator from the 53rd, but I'll try to do my best. Senators, This is probably the most common sense piece of legislation that we will get to vote on this year. But you're right, and it's also the best piece of legislation other than what we did last Friday before we left here for the weekend. Senator from the 27th brought this same piece of legislation last year, I believe, and we passed it, and I believe it was on a bipartisan effort. Part of the problem we have, senators, is we're part of the problem. So far this year, we've introduced almost 250 pieces of legislation in this chamber. We are creating more and more legislation that creates more and more government regulations. Every day we're in this building for 40 days. That doesn't include the hundreds of bills that are coming over from the House. I would expect before we leave here this session, there'll be more than 1,000 pieces of legislation that'll get passed by both chambers. And then the governor has to scrub all of these bills and then decide, does he want to veto these bills or let them become law? And the majority of them, unfortunately, will become law. Regulations follow these bills, as the senator from the 27th and the 53rd and the 37th have already talked about up here. Hundreds of pages of regulations come with all of these legislative acts because we don't have all the expertise to do this. We allow these other bureaucrats to follow these laws and enact them on our behalf. But I can tell you this, I don't have constituents in my home district telling me, go back down to Atlanta, create some more laws so we can create some more rules to where we can increase the cost of living on our families. In fact, they asked me to come down here to cut bills, cut laws, cut regulations, lower their taxes. And I hope that's what we'll do here with this bill today. This has nothing to do with what's going on in Washington. Some of you are trying to tie this to national politics. This has absolutely nothing to do with Washington, D.C. This has something to do with everybody we represent here in Georgia. 11 million people paying taxes, trying to work every day, trying to create a living for their families. Let's talk about one example, the cost of housing. Everybody in this building has talked about how can we lower the cost of housing to create more affordable housing. Did you know that 29% of every home built in the state of Georgia is to the cost of the regulations that are passed either by the federal government, the state government, or local entities? That's because of our regulations and our bills that we come down here thinking are good for our citizens. 29% of the cost of every home built is because of government red tape. It's time to put the politics aside. Let's roll back the red tape in this building and across the hall, and let's send a strong message to the rest of the country that Georgia's here to take care of our working families. I'll yield the will.
Are we ready for the minority report yet, Senator? Oh, excuse me, Senator from the 5th.
Dear colleagues, I've been sitting here and being a little confused. I heard a lot of stuff. It's a great bill, the best bill of the session. Should be simple yes vote, common sense legislation, roll back the tape, nothing to the DC. But the author I just heard said, this bill is the spirit of the federal Dodge program. Whenever I think about spirit of Dodge, you think about Elon Musk, and that's the mean spirit. That's a bad spirit. Every time I looked at it here from my constituency, they're scared. So I'm just a little confused. You know, we need to keep Georgia. I mean, why you would name this bill or even mention about Dodge if you don't have any intention of cutting jobs or cutting, employment? And I don't know. I'm just a little confused. So, and then again, what rules you're trying to cut, because your party's been powerful for the last couple of decades. So I guess two things comes to my mind is you are trying to cut the own rules that you all created last 20-some years, or you're embracing what Elon Musk wants to do in DC, or doing it, not necessarily wants to do. Cut all these jobs, not necessarily cutting all the jobs and everything else. He is trying to cut, taking his chainsaw, cut the Medicare, Medicaid, and anything you name of it. But anyway, that's my take. That's a bad spirit. If you do want to cut red tape, do it by the agency, do it by the committee, do it whatever you need to do, but don't bring Federal Doge program or Elon Musk to Georgia. Elon Musk will not going to be much popular coming 6 months or so. Take my word on it. Mr. President, I yield the word.
All right, these names just keep on coming here. Recognize the senator from the 35th. Why don't we just let the whole chamber talk about it? Why don't everybody just line up?
Mr. President, I was actually not going to speak on this bill, but I changed my mind after hearing from a whole bunch of different experts in the room. I told you last week that I'm a lawyer, a defense lawyer, and I also said I'm a regulatory lawyer. I work with corporations across the country on regulations to ensure that they comply with it, but also ensure that to the extent that there are regulations, particularly at the federal level, that would hurt consumers, that we do what we can to eliminate those regulations. So I have no problem with cutting red tape, and I have no problem with ensuring that we are not burdening our small businesses. In fact, a regulatory scheme, a law like this is in the books in Washington. But here's what we're doing with this bill. And I supported this bill last year, but after giving it a lot more thought and seeing what I do in my professional life, what we're doing is we're inviting Washington's problems to the state capitol. Because if you go to Washington and you're a company, a small business, you're with the association, and you pay that association to pay lobbyists, to file lawsuits, to file paperwork, to fight regulations. In Washington, there are multiple steps where you could do that. And that's why it takes rules, years to implement. And you know who has to spend a lot of time with those rules as well? Congress. So colleagues, here's what you're doing with this bill. You're not only inviting more lawyers like me into this building and into your agencies, not only are you inviting more lobbyists, but you're going to spend way more time, instead of passing bills that you're interested in, you're going to spend way more time in this chamber debating rules. I'm not sure about y'all. I didn't come here to micromanage agencies. I didn't come here to debate rules. I came here to pass laws. So if you want to actually focus on what you were elected to do, which is to make laws, then you should keep the rulemaking to the agencies. And I'd like to remind you that for the last 22 years, every agency and this chamber and the chamber across the hallway has been controlled by one party. So the extent that there is red tape, it has been placed by one party. I'm happy to work with you to cut that red tape, but adding the bureaucracy and adding more overhead, adding more time to the legislative process is not the way to do that. We do not need Washington's problems in Georgia. And by passing this bill, that's exactly what you're doing. I yield the well.
Recognize Senator from the 18th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to be brief because so much has been said. But this has been one of the more interesting debates that we've had this year, and maybe even beyond this year. I want to thank the senator from the 27th for bringing this legislation. I don't understand how we have somehow gotten wrapped around the axle into thinking this creates more bureaucracy. It doesn't. What it does do is create more responsiveness and accountability of our state government to the people that we're supposed to be working for. That's what this does. So many of y'all have spoken about the value of this and why this is needed. I'm going to take a slightly different approach and ask you this. One of the most common calls I get in asking me to serve my constituents, and I wonder if you get the same one, is someone out there who doesn't have connectivity with the Capitol, doesn't have a way to make one of our bureaucrats, one of our agencies respond. And they will call with the story of how they have been calling and trying and leaving messages for literally for months because they need some sort of interaction, some sort of interface with one of our agencies, and they can't get it. Y'all get those calls? I think it's one of the ways that I serve my constituents best in providing that connectivity. Never do I finish up and give that constituent what they need that I don't have that final thought that I suspect you have too, which is what? You know, it's kind of sad she had to reach out to her state senator to get that simple connectivity of what they needed. But that's what they have to do. So the spirit behind this, and one of the things, the big drivers about why this makes sense, is it provides that additional connectivity and a closer connectivity between the constituents that we are here to serve and the people at the bureaucratic level that are supposed to be doing that. It just gives a little oversight and accountability in that regard. That's not bureaucracy, folks. That's called government working the way it's supposed to, or at least pushing it in that direction. That's all this does. We need to vote on this bill. This is a good bill for the folks back home so they can better get responsiveness and accountability from their government, and we're helping them do that. That's a pretty good thing. I urge you to vote yes on the bill. Thank you. I yield the will.
The senator has yielded. Senator from the 14th, you're finally on. I'm excited about it too.
Thank you, Mr. President. In fact, we suspended the news show this morning because we're doing a special broadcast this afternoon. Boo. There's no better audience than one that's been tired and worn out by 20 speakers, so I'm super thrilled to be up here right now. Let's start. I'm delivering the minority report. Let's start with the commonality between me and the senator from the 27th, which has been alluded to a couple times. The absolute truth of this bill is that this bill is very different than federal DOG in the way that it works on the ground. But it is, to quote the author of the bill, in the spirit of DOG. And I think the senator from the 5th gave you a preview of some of what I'd like to talk about. But first, let's go back in time, to 2010, when there was the birth of a meme. You may recognize this meme. Most of you, for your sanity, hopefully do not. This is a dog of the Shiba Inu breed. This particular dog is named Kabosu. Now, Kabosu, the dog, was not known until Kabosu's owner in 2010 made a blog post with this iconic picture that came to be known as Doge. Now, some people are pronouncing it Doge because of the old school clerical implications. I prefer Doge. But in late 2013, this meme started to really take off. Now, as you may know, a meme is an internet phenomenon. It's kind of like a shared joke that people can circulate. If anybody ever sends you a picture of something with letters on it to sum up a mood or an attitude, that's a meme. And if you're asking why this inscrutable, weird, doofy meme has appeared on your desks this afternoon, I would humbly submit to you because of Elon Musk. That is the reason we're talking about Doge today. That's the reason that the cameras are here, because I don't think the cameras came, no offense, Mr. President, for red tape rollback. So let's talk about what the spirit of Doge means. As you can see, there's some choppy language on this picture. It says, "So Senate," very tape, much legal. The point of the meme is to have sort of broken grammar, to be inaccessible to normal modes of meaning. It's an inside joke, and it's an inside joke that's been around for 10 to 15 years, and it's an inside joke that Elon Musk likes most of all. In fact, so much that he created a cryptocurrency. Well, he didn't create it, but he has advocated for a cryptocurrency around the Doge meme, the Doge brand, called Dogecoin, which, by the way, doubled in value pretty much since the election. I'll talk about that in just a second. The point of this meme, the point of a brand that's centered around an internet dog, is to be inaccessible. The point is that the meaning is not available to a lot of the people who are living in the United States, working for the federal government, working for the state government. To make a department called the Department of Government Efficiency is to look for the acronym DOG, to find words that fit the letters so that you can take that meme and turn it into government. Now, again, we've been accused of turning federal issues into state issues, if they're different, initiatives, that this is not DOG. Let me just say in the most passive of tenses and voices that this bill was branded DOG in a Senate-involved incident. That is not the choice the minority party made, but the choice has been made to bring DOG into this chamber, at least in spirit, so we should talk about what it means. Now, we've reviewed at the federal level what the spirit of DOG has meant. It has meant mass firings, many of which were illegal and not pursuant to due process under civil service protections. It has meant the facilitating of access to individuals with no security clearances to sensitive payment systems at Treasury, information at the Social Security Administration. It has meant firings of critical employees like nuclear weapons stockpile managers, CDC, disease response personnel, and FAA personnel. Now, that's what the spirit of DOG has meant at the federal level. What I want to talk to you about, because I think my colleagues have sort of amply covered the rest of the discussion at the federal level, is why this dog? Why this meme? What does it mean in terms of the actual decisions being made? It reflects the philosophy that government is a joke. That is what Elon Musk thinks. He thinks his money and his wealth entitle him to run the world. And that the government that's in place, the millions of federal workers, the laws that govern their service and put them in a position to succeed, that those laws are a joke as well. But more so than a joke they don't understand. A joke that only the tech bros whose money should entitle them to world domination understand. The second thing that the dog means is it's a loyalty test. Like so many other things from the Trump administration, it is calculated to be an indignity to the people who have to say it. I would submit to you that it is an indignity that the Georgia Senate and elected officials nationwide have to talk about this dog when referring to Trump's alleged reform efforts. It's a way of saying, you're going to take our joke seriously, in fact, so seriously that if you don't take us as basically the internal federal ombudsman who run everything, if you don't take us as the absolute authority, you could lose your job. There's a 5 points email sent in the last week. You hear about this the last couple days. Every federal employee pretty much got an email that said, name the 5 things that you did last week, in response to this email. And Tulsi Gabbard at DNI and Kash Patel at FBI already told their employees, don't respond to this email, right? So DOG is thoughtless. That is the spirit of DOG, it is actions en masse with no respect to details or nuance that are calculated to be traumatic. I use the word traumatic because Russell Voigt, the incoming director, I believe at OMB or OIRA, I have to go check, but one of the regulatory bodies, he was quoted before all this went down saying, our goal here is to traumatize, to give trauma to federal workers so that they self-select out of the workforce. It is not just an efficiency effort, it is an antagonistic, hostile effort designed to demoralize federal employees. That's what the spirit of DOG means. And again, lastly, follow the money, Senator from the 26th. The more that we talk about DOG, the more that the non-functional cryptocurrency that has no practical application, unlike other blockchains, maybe Bitcoin, maybe, there's different types of crypto that might have practical applications. Dogecoin is called a meme coin for a reason. It has no practical application. But the more we talk about it here and elsewhere, the more money that people like Elon Musk make directly from their crypto. Now, this is not federal DOG, functionally. And I want to give it up to the Senator from the 27th, the LG's office. I know how much work has gone into this bill and how this bill builds on existing mechanisms of legislative vetoes that actually already are in code. Now, some of the aspects are new. The small business review is new. The 4-year regulation reset is a new feature that was in the bill that was passed out of the Senate last year. And these are technical decisions to transfer power from regulatory agencies back to the legislature that can be defended philosophically. That it is not the same thing as federal DOG in that respect. However, I want to draw a line for you between something great we did today and something not as great we're doing today. Something great we did today was we passed the Senator from the 20th's bill that identified a specific sequencing issue in examinations for a specific type of industry and trade. We came in as a legislature and we fixed it. We found a problem with regulatory reform, basically, or regulations that were too burdensome. We identified the problem, we fixed it with a unanimous vote. And I humbly submit to you, and this is in the minority report, that if we were to look at every rule and regulation that comes up organically through industry complaints, if the industry comes to us and says, this rule is causing us harm, it's causing us paperwork problems, it doesn't accomplish anything, we need to look at it. The legislature has the ability to do that, and we've done that every year. The red tape rollback brand last year included measures that Democrats voted for that had to do with specific industries where we knew about specific problems. But contrast that with what this bill does, which is it says all rulemaking across all agencies except for the ones exempted have to re-justify, reissue their rules every 4 years. It doesn't matter what the content is. And when we asked in committee what specific rules are we talking about, we didn't get a clear answer. So this is not driven by industry saying we need help with these specific regs. This is driven by a generic, ideological distrust of government. And that's dangerous. Grover Norquist said he wanted to do what to government? Drown it in a bathtub. Make it so small that it can be drowned in a bathtub. And that ideology of dismissing everything government does, irrespective of the details, leads us to federal DOGE and it leads us to state DOGE, the same spirit. Now, the sponsor of the bill will note that I went on the news and I agreed with the fundamental philosophical premise of protecting small businesses. I have said on the record, we do not want to bury small businesses in a mountain of paperwork. And if the small businesses in a sector came to us and said, this rule is burying us, we could do exactly what we did for the Senator from the 20th, and we could address that rule. But this is more work, more distrust for agencies that are already understaffed, who already have budget issues. A couple of my colleagues have mentioned. Now, who here has sat through budget hearings? They are very nice to sit through. There's a lot of, it's dignified, and we get to connect with our agencies. They get about 2 minutes to talk. But what do we hear from agencies every year who they got to be careful not to make the government mad, the governor? They say, oh, well, we have enough money for sure, but we could really use a salary adjustment. Why? Because we are chronically paying our state employees far less, there's not even a respectable difference, far less than what they could make in the private sector for comparable work. They're doing multiple jobs. And so when we complain that they're not responsive, which is a comment we heard both in committee and on the floor today, well, these agencies have to be held accountable because they're not responsive. Why do you think they're not responsive? There's nobody to do the jobs. We're not paying them. They're not there. So the fact that legislators have to get personally involved in agency accountability and decision-making is direct evidence that we underfund our agencies chronically and that they're already overburdened. And now, with state DOGE, we're telling them, you've got to justify the rules you've got on the books every 4 years, and you've got to jump through these hoops and do more small business impact analysis. That is the type of legislative response that creates a legitimacy spiral for the government. We say, we don't trust you, government, so we're going to take away your resources. And then what happens? Government becomes even less responsive and more overburdened. And then what happens? We get more mad at them because they're less responsive. And the cycle continues. There were 2 Congress people I want to note to you who had hearings or calls, town halls with their voters over the weekend on federal DOGE. Rich McCormick and Congresswoman Bice. And the thing that they heard resoundingly from their constituents, both Republicans and Democrats, is we don't want to hear political talking points anymore to justify a wholesale dismantling of our government. Congresswoman Bice tried to say, well, did you know that the VA is doing housing for illegals or some scare words like that? And her Republican voter cut her off in the call and said, I don't want to hear all that. What I know is that my benefits are under attack. What I know is that there's a group of teenagers under Elon Musk's purview who are threatening to stop payments unilaterally that have been authorized by Congress. That's what I know. And this goes back to a sentence that's in the minority report. One person's red tape is another person's due process. And when you take an axe to all regulations, irrespective of what's in them, and you put political pressure on agencies not to issue regulations that are in effect, you might be taking away some of your voters' due process in ways that, because we haven't looked at specific examples, you may not even have been thinking of. it comes back to this. The more that we cultivate a confused, scrambled, nonsensical view of what our government does, the more that we push that with voters, guess what? Voters are going to start thinking that government is confused, ineffective, nonsensical. And this is the level of analytical sophistication that we will end up bringing as representatives of those people to this body. We owe it, just like I owe it to the senator from the 27th, to be honest and accurate about what his bill actually does, meaning that it's not the same thing as federal DOGE. We owe it to our voters to be honest, accountable about what our state agencies do and not to fearmonger and make it act like all government is bad all the time and put them in a constant survival quest to justify their own existence. With that, I will yield for questions if anybody has them, but let's hope not.
You have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. President.
We have a late arriving amendment here. Recognize, Secretary, read the amendment first.
Mr. President, Senator Moore of the 53rd offers the following amendment number 2 to amend the Senate Committee Substitute of Senate Bill 28 by striking red on line 16 and replacing with blue. That completes the order, Mr. President.
I recognize the senator from the 53rd.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just in the course of the debate, myself and some of my colleagues back from North Georgia there, it's just come to our realization that my friends over in the Democratic Party, they think this bill is all about them. And that's why we're changing it from, in my amendment, from the red tape to the blue tape. Red tape is traditionally, hey, this is a stop. It's a stop to business. It's a stop to growth in our state. But you guys are really celebrating it in the Democratic Party, so I just want to make sure that our constituents back home understand that this is the blue tape rollback and not just the red tape rollback. I'll yield for any questions, Mr. President. Thank
Senator
you.
from the 12th, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator, is it not true that when we were elected by voters that wore red and voters that wore blue as well?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely we were.
Thank you. And is it not also true that it's almost like a personal affront to me when we sit and discuss this, when I know that we can move on to some things that are so much more important for my district, District 12? So thank you. I appreciate that.
Senator, I would just like to expound on that. This is extremely important to my district as well. Like I mentioned earlier in my argument, when those constituents were trying to create a campground, but the red tape, 200 pages of red tape was preventing that business. Northwest Georgia, tourism is mighty important to us. And rolling back regulation, and this amendment being blue regulation, as it seems, will be mighty beneficial to the people of Northwest Georgia. And I'll yield the well, Mr. President.
All right, Senator. Senator has yielded. Before we take that up, and I want to recognize a good friend of mine, Judge Ron Ramsey, former member of this body right here. Y'all give it up for the former senator here. Judge, you see all the excitement you're missing here, huh? Nothing's changed, has it? So, all right. I'm going to call on the senator from the 27th to hopefully close debate here.
Thank you, Mr. President, colleagues. To those of you that came to this well to have an intellectually honest discussion about what this bill does, I say thank you. To those of you that chose to come to this well and try to make this bill something that it is not, I would encourage you next time. I'd be more than happy to have conversations with you ahead of time to answer questions as to what the bill does. We see, though, it's kind of interesting. We've seen a number of instances this year where the minority party has been out of step with the vast majority of Americans. My first bill that I brought to this chamber was a bill in which 79% of Americans agreed with. This bill on a federal level is a bill that 68% of voters agree with. congressional level checks at the federal level around rulemaking, what they call the REINS Act in D.C. The similar legislation I said has been introduced in 20 different states in the union. 59% of Democrats, when asked about specifically what this bill does at the federal level, supported it there, and there's no reason to believe that they wouldn't also support it here. There's been kind of this breathless, almost frantic attempt to malign the current administration and the work that they're doing. And I just wish that we had the same breathless fear-mongering over the fiscal cliff that is facing this country. Did you know that your share of our national debt, yours, and yours, and yours, is $106,000? Did you know that your household share of the national debt is $273,000? Did you know that 60% of Americans have less than $5,000 in their checking account? So what we have seen an unchecked federal government, by the way, both parties are guilty of this, what we have seen an unchecked federal government do without the checks and balances that we're introducing into this piece of legislation, and with the power to print more money, we have seen them increase the federal debt more than 50 times the amount of money that the average American actually has. So if we're going to get worried about somebody taking a chainsaw to looking at this problem, I ask, what instrument do you think is appropriate? A scalpel. Okay, a scalpel. What the scalpel would do, and I remember this was Obama and Romney in their debate. Obama was complaining that they wanted to take a hatchet, and he thought that a scalpel was more appropriate. What did Obama do when he got elected? He came in and said, we can't wait for Congress to right-size the federal government. And he stood up an agency of unelected people to look at the size and scope of federal government and downsize it. One of his predecessors on your side of the aisle, Bill Clinton, was the last person that got anywhere near close balancing a budget. And so we have come so far from what fair-minded people would say is reasonable, and we've got so caught up in this tribalism that we can't even have an honest conversation about where we're at. The senator from the 10th grilled me with about 58 questions about a bill that he voted for last year. Last year's version of this bill, which has not substantively changed. This is a common sense piece of legislation. The lieutenant governor last year recognized that Georgia needed to join the states that had gone before us, Florida, Kansas, Indiana, and have a regulatory check, a regular teeth cleaning, if you will, around the rules right here in the state of Georgia. And regardless of how those rules came into place, I like to think of our agencies as nonpartisan. But regardless of how those rules came into place under those agencies, it is a good practice. The senator from the 10th also clarified that he looks at the best ways to run his business every single day. But we're objecting to government looking at it 1 out of every 1,200 days. The minority whip mentioned that this is a new task every 4 years. Yeah, it's every 4 years. It's a reasonable time period to come back and to look at it. Just as reasonable as asking federal employees to show up for work, and just as reasonable for asking any employee that anyone is paying, what did you accomplish last week? This bill passed out of here last year 14-13. It was a common sense piece of legislation then. It's a common sense piece of legislation now. Let's not make it something that it's not. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the will.
Thank you, Senator. I recognize the senator from the 53rd. For what purpose do you rise?
Mr. President, thank you. In order to prevent tribalism, I'll withdraw amendment number 2.
Oh, okay. All right. Is there objection to the senator moving to withdraw his amendment number 2? Hearing none, amendment 2 is withdrawn. All right. Question is on amendment number 1, authored by the senator from the 27th. Is there objection to amendment number 1? There is objection to amendment number 1. All those in favor of amendment number 1, authored by the author of the bill, will vote yea. All those opposed, nay. Secretary, unlock the machine. Senator from 41st, for what purpose do you rise?
Point of order.
State your honor.
Mr. President, isn't it true that under this scheme, only people in the majority party will have an opportunity to ask for these during session? All minority party members, except for the very few of us who happen to maybe have a chairmanship, would be able to ask for these?
I believe every senator in this body, Republican and Democrat, will have the ability to speak to the state agencies about these issues. Recognize Senator from the 10th.
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. President.
State your inquiry.
Isn't it true that if a senator would like to know how a certain person voted, they should do it while they're standing in the well?
Senator is passionate about what he speaks. On the adoption of amendment number 1, the yeas are 32 and the nays are 22, and this amendment is adopted. Questions on the adoption of the committee substitute as amended. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute as amended? Hearing none, the committee substitute as amended is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. Questions on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor vote yea. All opposed, nay. Secretary, unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 33, the nays are 22. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. Senator, you want to make an announcement? Well, hold on one second. We'll make an announcement. We'll have time for that in a second. Hold on one second. Majority Leader for a motion.
President, I move that the Senate stand adjourned until 10 a.m. on Wednesday, February the 26th.
The Majority Leader has moved. Mr. Secretary, read the announcements.
Mr. President, the Rules Committee will meet upon adjournment in room 450 in the Capitol. At 1:30, the Public Safety Committee will meet in room 450 in the Capitol. At 1:30, the Economic Development and Tourism Committee will meet in Mes 1. At 2:30, the Health and Human Services Committee will meet in room 450 in the Capitol. At 3:30, the Finance Committee will meet in Mes 1. And at 4:30, the Judiciary Committee will meet in room 307 in the CLOB. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Senator from the 40th, you can take the wheel.
Thank you, Mr. President. If any of the senators would like to be a member of the Mental Health Caucus, please see me or the senator from the 42nd if you have not made that intent known. Thank you.
Is there any other senator wish to make an announcement? The Majority Leader has moved that we stand adjourned until 10 a.m. Wednesday, February 26th. All those in favor of the Majority Leader's motion will signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. No. Ayes clearly have it. Have a good day.